It is not an exaggeration when I say that this video has been on my mind and on the list of videos I needed to make for at least 6 years. It was one of the, in fact, when I first started Disenthrall the channel, one of the items on my to-do list was to create this video, to tackle this issue from a rigorous, reasonable, rational, logical perspective. And I have not done it until today, because it is a very complicated topic that dives to the deepest depths of ethics and moral philosophy, and I never felt I was ready. And several months ago, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, it's time to do this. I started compiling all of the arguments that were out there, analyzing all of the details. I even put out a request, which a lot of you guys responded to, thankfully, and I'm thankful for that, to make sure that this was going to be a comprehensive analysis and dissection of the topic of abortion from the moral perspective of libertarianism and anti-subjectivism. So let's get into it. He has a plan, she has a plan, and you get to pay for it regardless.
The best way to get someone motivated is to stand for something strongly, deeply, passionately.
Subscribe to Disenthrall. Do as you're told.
And of course, will not just be me. I have a returning special guest, Christian. Welcome back to the show, Christian.
Oh, well, it's glad to be here. I personally love Larkin telling me to do as I'm told every single time I show up. So
every single time.
It never gets old.
I have introed almost every single show with that clip, and every time behind the scenes, you can't see it, but I smile when he orders me to do as I'm told. Every single time. Oh, man. So, for those of you that don't know, Christian is a co-author with me of the Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto, which is a secular moral philosophy of consent that underlies everything that we talk about. Certainly we've talked about it at length on the channel, but if you're not familiar with it, please go check out antisubjectivism.com or search this channel for a video where I read the manifesto to you called Anti-Subjectivist Manifesto. You can find that video or on our SoundCloud if you prefer audio formats. So obviously that will be the underpinning libertarian philosophy from which we analyze everything that we're going to talk about here today. I see a lot of you in chat. A lot of stuff's going on. This is going to be a dynamic show. For the people watching this in the future, Roe v. Wade was just overturned by the assholes in black dresses in the Supreme Court. And people are currently blocking highways in various places around the country. I never understand how they don't just get ran over, but you know. Okay, so let's
exactly 12 hours ago, I think, was when the ruling was, right? It was right around noon, right? From what I remember.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I had reached out to Christian to help me put this show together to make sure that it was really comprehensive and rigorous several weeks ago. And and with the news dropping today, we were like, okay, it's late, but it's time. So let's get into it. If you're new to the channel, what we do here is several things. Philosophy, where we analyze the goings on in the world from a libertarian moral philosophy perspective. We do activism, so we get out there on the streets and we don't protest, but we actually do good in the world. Things like feeding the homeless in Dallas, even though it's illegal. You can find videos of us doing that on, if you search this channel for a video called Feed the Need 5, that's a great introduction to that kind of activism. And we get up to all sorts of liberty-related conversations. If you've been linked this video, though, you probably made an argument for abortion that we're about to destroy. And hopefully they gave you a time code, but if not, after this video is done, we'll probably go back through and list all the time codes of all the different arguments that we attack, so you can hopefully jump to the specific one that you were linked here for. It's going to flow like this. And I'll say hello to people in chat as much as I can as we go. So it's good to see you all here. We're going to have a full house tonight, I bet. We're going to start out by laying out the foundation behind where we stand on abortion and specifically why in detail. And then we're going to go through every single argument for abortion that we could find. And in an attempt to make this the most comprehensive video on the internet, analyzing this topic, we're still going to miss something. But I bet if we miss something, it's going to be adjacent to one of the arguments that we do make in this video. So you can probably find something that addresses whatever argument you have. If you watch this video and still think that you have a stumper, something that is an argument that we missed, let me know. If I'm wrong, this is huge. I want to know. I would be excited to learn if I'm wrong and how I'm wrong. It would change my worldview, and I'm always open to having my mind changed. The way to do it is probably not in the live chat right now, though I'm sure you can drop your arguments in there. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up and read them all, but hey, go for it. Also, at the end of the show, if we have time and we're not dead tired, calm it down, people. I know everything's spicy right now. At the end of the show, we're going to offer some time for call-ins. So we're going to try and interact with you guys. And if you think we're wrong, or if you have an argument that we missed, you're welcome to call in. You can do that through our Discord server. Link in the description, disenthrall.me/platforms. On that webpage, you can find the Discord join link, join our main voice channel. My producer, Fallstar, is in there. He will facilitate getting you moved over at the end of the show when we do call-ins. What else am I missing? There's links in the description. If you want to super chat, special thing, doing it just for this stream. All super chats and donations in this stream are going to be handed directly, minus whatever fees I get charged, to my producer, Fallstar, for all of his assistance over the past several months. He's been helping out, publishing videos, uploading videos, making thumbnails, moderating the Discord server. He's been doing a lot of work, and the channel doesn't make a lot of money, so I can't really reimburse him or pay him as much as his effort is worth. So I'm calling it now. Every donation we get, including the one that already came in before I said this, is going to go to Fallstar to the best of my ability. If you use the Streamlabs super chat link in the description instead of YouTube steals half of everything I do. So please use that link. I will get more of it. Excuse me, Fallstar will get more of it when you use that link. Okay, I think that's...
Fallstar's an epic human being. If none of you have met him in the Discord server or anything, he definitely contributes a lot and is an awesome guy. So a great person for the money to be going to.
Yes. So yeah, if you want to support, not me, this is an altruistic act. If you want to support Fallstar today, please consider super chatting with your questions or comments, and that will go to him. If you want to support the channel, disenthrall.me/support, and you can donate there. Okay, cool. Let's get into it. Do you have any intros or anything you want to say about the topic before we get going, or?
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much everything. So we're going to be doing, if I counted correctly, 41 arguments for abortion, one off from 42. Some of these are going to be taken. Here's a better way of saying this. Some of these will be taken as seriously as they take themselves, I think, and others will be taken less seriously as they take themselves. Some things are just going to be attacks, and they're going to be kind of addressed as attacks. Others, the majority of them are actual positions and are going to have the proper amount of time dedicated to them. So please, if you for some reason subscribe to one of these and you feel like we skirt over it, hopefully we will do our due diligence in explaining why it may not get 20 minutes all to its own thing. So
JC Lesbill, thank you for the super chat. He says, here's some pesos turned into dollars. He says, by the way, it was great honor meeting you when you fed the homeless filet mignon at your birthday. Hey, I'm glad that you came out. We do that every year, early September. It's coming up. It's sneaking up on me, actually. Yeah. Early September, we'll be doing it. We call it Celebration of Freedom and Bovinity. It's just we go out and we feed the homeless filet mignon because they usually get crappy free food. So probably be doing that again this year. Okay, I want to begin by saying a couple things. This is a secular set of arguments. We are not, and this is for all the pro-abortionists out there, and we'll get to that term in a second, but for everybody watching, we're not saying our God told us that murdering babies is wrong, therefore it's wrong. I wanted to state that clearly and up front, because a lot of the pro-abortion people accuse anybody that's anti-abortion of approaching it from a spiritual or religious perspective. Nothing that you hear tonight will be an appeal to a god or an appeal to a spirituality or any such thing. Take that as you will. That's not a slight against it. I'm just clearly separating us from that set of arguments. The second thing is the terminology that I will be using. Christian can speak for himself. He owns his own mouth that I'm not in control of. I refuse to use either side's rhetoric, pro-life, pro-choice, because neither of those address the topic at contention, and they're both an attempt to manipulate the conversation towards their respective sides. The pro-life people are not consistently pro-life in other areas, and the pro-choice people are not consistently, by any stretch, consistent in their pro-choice positions. Can I get a hell yeah vaccines? Okay, like if you didn't hold that people should have the choice on what to put inside their bodies when it came to the COVID vaccines, you are not pro-choice. Shots fired. Fine. Okay, so I do not say pro-choice. I do not say pro-life. The issue in contention is abortion. There are some people that are pro-abortion. There are some people that are anti-abortion. Those are the words I will be using. Deal with it. Christian, do you agree, or do you use the terms?
No, I use pro and anti-abortion. I think I'm a lot of these super popular topics in the conversation, they do their best on both sides to obfuscate everything behind as much language as possible that kind of hides where everything is actually going. Let's just keep it on topic. I think one or two of the arguments we posted may have used a different term, but when I'm going to be referencing, at least I'm going to say pro or anti-abortion. So,
yeah, most of the stuff that we're going to read as positions that we're going to be rebutting are things that other people have written. So it's not like we've put them in our own words. We're going to try and use their words to the greatest extent possible. Do you want to lead off? Because what we need to do now is set the foundation. And then what we're going to do for the rest of the show as we go over the 41 arguments is we're going to reference back to the principles that we're going to lay out up front. Do you want to lead that off, Christian?
Yeah, sure, I can. 100%. So the biggest thing, the most important thing that you need to know before we go any further is that abortion is always murder. Always murder. In every situation outside of rape, the mother and the doctor, if there is a doctor involved that helped to perform the procedure, are the ones who are morally culpable for the murder of the baby. We need to address this now, even though it is a bit of a touchy topic, because it is going to become somewhat relevant as things continue. But rape is the one exception to this, and it's not considered an abortion by technicality. It is an eviction, which entails removing the fetus, which has been placed inside of the mother against her consent through an aggressive act with as little harm as possible. And the resulting outcomes from that eviction are then placed onto the rapist. So there's a couple of things in there that I think we could probably slow down and explain a bit. So Patrick, do you want to talk some about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we say abortion is always murder, that means even in the case of rape, the baby's getting killed against, absent any consent. It is always murder, no matter what happens. Sometimes those killings are unfortunately justified in the case of rape, which is the exception that he just talked about. And it is an exception because there was no consent to the baby being inside the mother and using her property and resources. And as libertarians, anarcho-capitalists, voluntarists, everything must be voluntary. And so when a rapist comes along and violates the consent and property of the mother, then she is not enslaved to that victim baby, even though it is an absolutely tragic situation. I've thought about this, like I said, for years. I am open to counter arguments. If anything, this position is the one that I am most emotionally unhappy with, but I don't hold my positions from emotion. I hold my positions by the force of reason, is what I like to say. And so this one where eviction, not abortion, and I mark a difference for those that aren't aware. Abortion is usually the medical procedure where they go in, they dissect the kid, or they suck its brains out or whatever and pull it out, doing usually fatal damage. They inject saline to burn it or whatever to death, and then they extract the corpse. That's abortion. Eviction, this is something that a guy named Walter Block came up with, where you evict the person, causing the least amount of damage possible, giving it the greatest chance possible of continuing to live, because it's about reciprocal force. So if somebody wanders onto my property, I don't immediately go to dissecting them and sucking out their brains. I tell them to leave. And then if they don't leave, then I use the next level of force up. Okay, get off my property. Maybe I push them off. Maybe I physically remove them from my property. I don't immediately go to dissecting them and sucking their brains out or shooting them. You escalate force using the minimum amount necessary to resolve the trespass, to resolve the problem. That is eviction. So with rape, that's the position. The minimum amount of force necessary, causing the least amount of harm and damage to the baby as possible to remove them from the trespass. Only in the cases of rape, which differs from Walter Block, and I've got to specify this because Walter Block is the one that came up with the arguments for evictionism, is what he calls it. I think it's only justified in the case of rape. The last part of that was the culpability, right? So in the case of an abortion, it's a murder, and we'll get to the arguments for why in a second, but just like any other murder, the person culpable is the one that carries out the murder, which in the case of most abortions would be the mother plus the abortion doctor and maybe tangentially the nurses and whatever else is involved in that system of making it happen. In the case of rape, it's the person that initiated the entire situation. And I'll digress into this, and I'm going to get really nitpicky in this video because I want this to be the video that I can link people to. So we're going to get a little long-winded and detailed and myopic, and I don't care because it needs to be done. So an analogy I use for why the rapist is the one culpable to any harm that the baby comes to through the process of eviction is an analogy I use is the gas station robber, the gas station holdup. So a guy goes into a gas station, sticks up the cashier, demands all the money in the register, starts threatening the people, give me all your wallets, give me all your watches and rings. And one of the innocent people in the gas station pulls out his gun and tries to shoot the bad guy. And maybe he does. Maybe he gets one into the bad guy and one of his shots misses and hits an innocent bystander. It is near universally recognized, as far as I can tell, in both common law as well as in most modern jurisdictions, that the robber, the person that created that entire situation, is the one culpable for the entire outcome of the situation. And so even though one of the victims in the situation attempted to defend himself, and in the process of defending himself accidentally hurt another innocent third party, even that innocent third party, that injury, that even murder, if it comes to it, the robber is the one charged with it, not the guy defending himself in the situation. So that's the analogy I use for the rape, pregnancy, eviction harm. The rapist created the situation using a horrific act of violence on a woman, and if she chooses to keep the baby, I mean, she's a hero in my opinion, but she's not in any way, you can't put any positive moral obligation on her to keep that, to be enslaved by the rapist doing that to her. She has to have the right to make her property whole, and if she does that, she needs to evict it, meaning she needs to do the least harm possible to the baby, to give it the greatest possibility, the greatest chance of surviving with the least damage possible. And then whatever does happen, whatever damage happens, harm happens, up to and including the death of the baby, that's on the rapist, rightfully, as the one that created the situation. So I think that hopefully lays out a clear sort of end-to-end picture of both normal abortion, the position of normal abortion, and the exception that everybody throws up in your face the first time you take a anti-abortion position, which is rape. So hopefully we've summarized those two. Back to you, Christian. What's next?
Right. I just wanted to do one thing real quick and just make sure it was super clear. When we're talking about normal abortion versus the rapist situation, which again, you know, it's hard stuff to talk about, but it's super important for these kinds of conversations. it's really just a question of culpability is what's being drawn here. It's not that we don't like rape because there's like some emotional connotation and it's icky and therefore, oh, well, you can abort or evict, that's fine, whichever term. Then it's 100% built off of a necessary product of culpability. So in a normal case of an abortion, it is the mother and the doctor who are culpable because there's no one outside of them that's involved in that ethical interaction. And in the case of the rape, it is the rapist who is culpable because of his aggression, which initiated the circumstances of the interaction to begin with. Just to make sure that's super clear.
Yes.
So to really understand all of this and to understand why we have the position that abortion is always murder, the next thing we have to cover, arguably the most important thing one might say, is why that is. So there's this idea that we talk about a lot, and it's what are rights and who gets them on this channel. Patrick has said it a number of times, but it comes up especially important in this conversation. And so I'm going to read just a little bit here just to make sure I don't miss anything, because this has been a lot of time put into this. But
let me read the there's two ways to put it. There's the highfalutin, complicated ass language that the philosophers will tackle and try and wrap their heads around, and then there's a more clearly stated layman version that'll make a lot more sense. And I'm going to say both for both people in the audience. The first one is going to confuse a lot of people, and other people, they're going to be thinking about it for a while. This is something I've worked on for years. And then the second one is a really clearly stated, oh, okay, I get it. All right. Do you mind if I take this, Christian? Because
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
All right. Sorry. I think I asked you to talk about what's next, and then I took it back. So I'm sorry.
You're fine.
So a while back, years ago, I started trying to figure out what are rights. What are they? Why are they? Why do we have them? How do they function? And I went through several definitions. I debated the definitions with multiple people, trying to refine them, figure out where the weak spots were. And this is sort of the best definition of rights that I've ever heard or seen, obviously, because it's the one I hold to, whatever. But rights are mutual reciprocal understandings between, and that should be afforded to, all beings who are or will become apperceptive to both A, advanced conceptualization, and B, gratification deferral and long-term future planning, and should exclude those who do not continue to reciprocate them. That's the philosopher's version with big words, but it's really simple. Rights are mutual understandings and agreements between people. I will not punch you if you will agree to not punch me. And if you punch me, there's no onus on me not to punch you back. That's called self-defense for the layman, right? They should be afforded to people that can understand concepts, which is much plainer than the other language I used, right? Why do they need to understand concepts? Because rights, mutual agreements, are concepts. And if you're a creature, a rock or a dog or a pony or whatever, and you can't understand concepts, then you can't understand rights, then you can't actually enter into rights-based agreements with other people. That's part A. That's why understanding concepts are important. The second thing that you need to participate in rights agreements with people is the ability to determine one's actions, control yourself, and plan ahead, defer gratification. Why is that important? Because the way rights agreements work is you have a concept in your head that says, it's important for me, even though it might help me in the moment to get ahead, to steal my neighbor's apples off his apple tree, even though that would be a boon to me in the moment, I'm not going to. Why am I not going to? Because I have this concept in my head called rights. And it's important to me that my neighbor respect my rights and my property and not steal stuff from my property. And so I'm going to defer the gratification of getting to eat juicy apples into the future by limiting my actions, controlling my actions now by respecting his rights. That's why that's the B, that's the part 2. And both of those are important to being a being that has the ability to enter into these agreements with other people about rights. So what are rights? They're mutual agreements between people that have the ability to understand the agreements and make them. That's the layman version of what I just said. And the last thing is they should be afforded to all those who continue to reciprocate them. Or, said inversely, they should exclude those who do not continue to reciprocate them. That means you should stop respecting the rights of somebody that attacks you. I mean, obviously. You should not respect the rights of somebody that attacks your friend, because you can see, oh, look, they're not respecting my friend's rights. Why should I reciprocate rights with them? Why should I worry about their property if they're going to attack other people and they're going to hurt other people's property? So that is rights in a nutshell. And that's another foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, back to you, Christian, and I swear I'm going to shut up this time.
Right. This is my one little addendum that I always add to the conversation of what are rights and who gets them, that I think is, again, super important in this conversation. All beings who are or will become apperceptive is granting rights to things or people which have not yet shown the capacity for consent or have not engaged in the reciprocation of consensual rights, etc. And this is super important because this conception of rights is descriptive. It's not a prescriptive conception of rights, which is very critical to understanding how this works and why it's formulated the way it is. And if we were to create a system of what are rights and who gets them, where you only grant rights to people who have demonstrated that they're willing to reciprocate them, no one reciprocates rights. Obviously, that's not how it works. I can't meet a random person, punch them in the nose, and be like, well, I wasn't sure if they would reciprocate rights yet, because one, you're most likely just aggressing against someone who would be more than willing to reciprocate your rights. And two, this is, again, descriptive. This is not how we operate with rights in the normal, average, everyday world. If that was the case, then all bets would be off and we would just be in the state of nature. There would be no ethics. All of this would be a giant waste of time. So that to me is a super critical point to make sure I tag in at the end there. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'm glad you pointed that out. I forgot to mention it is descriptive. It was my attempt to not say this is what rights should be. It was my attempt to say this is what rights actually function as between people now every day. And the reason why this definition is different is because most of the definitions of rights that are out there now are prescriptive, and they reify these concepts called rights into things that exist. And you've all heard this language. You have rights. Your rights were taken. Your rights were destroyed, stolen, infringed. Your rights protect you from theft. They talk about rights, this concept that only exists between people's ears in their heads, as things that exist and that can be transferred and taken and given away and stolen, and all of those all that language that tries to reify the stuff into real things that exist and can be affected tangibly are dangerous because they can leave people feeling more safe than they actually are. And again, I'm going long form on this show, and this is important. If you think that you have rights, you have a right to life, liberty, and property. If you think that there's rights out there, and most people don't even think about this stuff, right? So like most people are just going to think, okay, I have rights. And talking about rights that way subconsciously will set their brain up to think that they are somewhat protected because they have rights. They're not. Concepts don't protect you. There aren't concept shields floating around your body that bullets will bounce off of if somebody attacks you. There's not concept shields floating around your property, keeping it safe from people that want to steal your stuff. That's not how it works. And it's important that we talk about things as close to reality as possible. This is Philosophy 101. We have to be as close to reality as possible to function as effectively as possible in reality. So my conception of rights, as I described, removes that superstition. Rights are just agreements between people. They protect you only to the degree that you can trust the people that you make the agreements with to keep those agreements. And it also makes it very clear that there's a lot of people around you that don't give a shit about your rights. They don't agree to do shit with you. They don't reciprocate anything with you. They'll rob you the moment they think they can get away with it, and sometimes even if they think they can't get away with it, they'll try anyway. Think government, but anything, right? And so if you realize that these rights aren't real entities that are physically protecting you, and even as a layman, if you don't talk about them like they're real physical entities that protect you, then you'll take steps to protect yourself. You'll think about this stuff more in terms of, okay, I need to find a group of friends that I can trust, friends that will respect my property, and I can reciprocate that respect for theirs. And anyone outside of that, I got to be careful. I got to make sure, I don't know what kinds of people they are. I have to wait and find out. I have to be cautious. I have to protect myself, because no government, no magic constitution paper, and no concept called rights is going to do anything to protect you. It's not how it works. It's up to you. It's up to you to find good people, to surround yourself with good people, so that you can be safer, more protected, more successful in life, so that you can have rights. I don't like saying have, but that's the common parlance. You don't have rights, but so that you can find people that will respect your life and property. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, reciprocation is the key point here. Without reciprocation, there's no meaningful rights in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's plain to see once you do a little bit of a critical analysis of it. So we're about to do a summary of kind of what we were just at. And if I was kind of skimming through the chat some, and I think it would be important, because there seems to be a bit of confusion, if we really touch on the culpability aspect one more time as we go through, like really dig into that, because there seems to be some confusion on that perspective. And also, I should have said this in the beginning, but this is a very contentious topic with a lot of people who I believe genuinely, most of them mean well, especially if you're here at this channel, you most likely mean well. So Everybody in the chat, most people are here to learn. Let's, we're going to have plenty of time for conversations and disagreements. So let's just keep it cool, and everybody, we'll see where we end up at the end of this, Yeah.
Let me just echo that. Like, the people watching this channel, y'all are the good guys. You are the cream of the crop in the world. So please give people that you disagree with in the chat a little bit of grace. And I know we're talking about what I consider to be murder. And so I'm asking you to give people that think it's not murder a little grace, because that's how we have conversations. We have to suspend our emotions and our feels long enough to actually discuss the issue. And that goes for both sides. That goes for people freaking out that you're trying to take their womb away from them. And it goes for the other side that thinks it's murder. If we're going to talk through this stuff, if we're going to change anyone's minds, we have to put the emotions in a box long enough to actually talk and think through it. So guys, please be nice to the other people in chat. Be nice to everybody. Let's be productive. Okay. And I think we did this out of order. I'll let you go, but I think we should have saved the position for the last and actually built up to how we got to it first. But yeah.
I think we might have caused. It's all right. I think we might have jumped the gun a little bit by getting just a bit of ourselves, but it's fine. We're substantiating what we were saying earlier. So now that we know what are rights and who gets them, we understand that consent is a massive aspect of this, right? And we understand, hopefully, maybe you disagree, but the words hopefully made sense at least, that from our perspective of descriptive rights, these are things that are attributed to beings who will become human sentient things, whatever language, apperceptive, whatever language you would like to use, to this capacity for consent. And so this is where the idea of culpability starts to come in. So in a normal case of abortion, where you just have a mother and/or mother, doctor, staff, etc., that want to remove a otherwise perfectly viable baby from their body. And I'm not trying to use charged language here by any means. I want to make that clear as well. But the culpability is on the mother during the act of sex, which produced the child, for them to be engaged in the, you could say, stewardship or caretaking of that child, because they were put into that position by the actions of the mother. That is where the culpability comes from. We're going to be addressing an argument later that some of you might have in relationship to this, but I think that's super important to know. And we afford the consent to this fetus because of the rights described before, the descriptive set of rights. So in that situation, because of the actions of the mother, she is the one who's due to take care of the child, and neglecting to do so while the baby is still within her body and performing an abortion results in what we would consider a murder, which is a moral wrong, an aggression, bad, very bad. In the case of the rapist is where the calculus changes, because the action which resulted in the conception of the child was not done by the mother's own volition. They cannot be said to be culpable for actions which they themselves, like the example of the gas station robber was brought up before, you can't be said to be responsible for the result of actions you yourself did not consent to, right? So if someone, for example, like steals your car and crashes into somebody, just to give another hypothetical, you're not responsible for what your car did because you had no control over the situation. It was whoever stole the car, right? This is just another kind of tangent way of looking at it. And this is super critical to understanding why this distinction exists. And I wanted to make sure we harped on it again before we continued. So Patrick, did I miss anything?
No, but I do want to say Knight jumps in the comments, says cowards took the comment down. If you're talking about us, dude, I'm not taking any comments down. I don't do that unless it's like going to get my channel banned or something. Yeah, maybe you're talking to somebody else. So we are culpable for the effects of our actions, even accidental ones. This is core to libertarian philosophy. I don't care which one you subscribe to. And I don't even like to say we own the effects of our actions, just to get even more pedantic. I say that we're culpable for the effects of our actions because actions aren't property and we can't own them. That's me being pedantic again, but you get the meaning. We are culpable for the effects of our actions. If I purposefully knock Christian into a lake, and I'm going to be using this analogy a lot in this live stream, so sorry in advance, Christian. If I shove Christian into a lake, I am culpable for the outcome of that situation. If he drowns, I murdered him. If he, I don't know, starts to drown and gets brain damage, then, I don't know what that'd be, assault and battery. I am culpable for what I do. And even if it's an accident, it's pretty plain to see. Like if I'm playing baseball and the baseball goes long and knocks out a window in somebody's house, I didn't mean to break that window, but it's still on me to make restitution for that window I broke. I'm still culpable for the effects of my actions, even when they're accidental. So those are the two core points. And then obviously, like we keep harping on, I'm not culpable for situations resulting from rape, obviously, because I didn't consent and I had no say in the matter that was done to me, absent my consent or in contravention of my consent. So that's where we start. We are culpable for the effects of our actions, even accidental ones. And then we just get to basic definitions, which we're going to cover because definitions are important with this stuff. Assault and murder is defined as the non-consensual harming or killing of another living being. I'm pretty sure no one should have disagreed with us so far on either of these foundational points. We are culpable for the effects of our actions, and assault and murder is the non-consensual harming and killing of living beings. And again, I'm not making the distinction to human. I try and keep my ethics as non-arbitrary as possible or as non-subjective as possible. Shout out to anti-subjectivism. And then the next one is that assault and murder are wrong. Hopefully no one is disagreeing with us yet. Any disagreements? No. But there's a lot of different moral philosophies that'll tell you a lot of different ways that assault and murder are wrong. And most of them are crap. But there's some good libertarian philosophy out there. And the one that we're going to, I guess, put forward is anti-subjectivism. You can see that manifesto at antisubjectivism.com or search this channel for it. Do you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, sure. So the next thing is that life begins at conception. And this is a scientific fact. Conception is very specifically defined. Life begins there. This is, you can debate it if you would like, but we're going to be debating more so on semantics than we are descriptive facts about reality. Whatever we're talking about in this idea of conception and life in relation, you would have to meaningfully change one of those two definitions in order for this not to be the case. So if you want to debate that, you can, but for the purposes of this conversation, we believe it to be very clear that life begins at conception. From this, we can derive that harming or killing a baby is assault and or murder. An abortion harms or kills a living baby. Therefore, abortion is murder. It's a very straightforward kind of idea. you should, in theory, be able to put together the A's to B's to C's. Now, it might take some waxing and waning as far as getting the actual thoughts in alignment. But from the principles that we've set out here, you should be able to accurately come to the same conclusions that we have and what we're going to be addressing all of the future arguments coming from.
Yeah, Cypherpunk points out maybe a nitpicky point, and hey, we're being nitpicky here, so it's cool. He says murder is killing another man, not an animal. Agreed. But I said the non-consensual killing. Animals can't consent. They are not beings that can conceptualize and defer gratification and control their actions in the ways that we talked about. They are ghosts in the realm of ethics and moral philosophy and consent. They don't have that capacity. They don't understand it or give a shit about it. So they wouldn't apply to what we were saying. It's the non-consensual killing of people that have those capacities and exist in the realm of moral philosophy, so to speak. But thank you for that point. It's important to differentiate.
Right.
Okay.
And you can read a lot more about that at antisubjectivism.com.
Yep. And we're going to say that over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like a thick foundation to everything we're talking about here. There's multiple libertarian philosophies. Anti-subjectivism is the least arbitrary, least subjective, most consistent one of those. Go check it out. Okay. So is it time? 41.
It's time.
This is the Baskin Robbins of abortion arguments. We've got a lot of flavors, and they're all terrible. No, like some of them are pretty good, and some of them are hilariously bad. And you guys have probably heard of all of them. So let's just get into it. How do you want to do this? Do you want to like take turns reading it, and then?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we've kind of categorized them. This one is personhood and humanity. That's our first category of arguments for abortion, pro-abortion arguments. The fetus is not a person. What do you say to that, Christian?
So actually what I kind of want to do, because I think this is a really huge argument, is I kind of want to steelman it for a second so that we're not like taking it uncharitably. And what's being said when someone says the fetus is not a person is that they're saying that the fetus, baby, whatever term you'd like to use, is not someone engaged in the moral calculus. They're not an actor, an agent, whatever term you would like to use in your ethics. They're not of consideration. They're the same as a rock, your phone, etc. So this idea of personhood is very important to a lot of ethical theories because personhood is where you get your rights from, etc. Not in the rights that we have described necessarily, but in a lot of ethical theories. So this is where this kind of response comes from. And we have to go back to our conception of rights to understand why we would disagree with something like this, right? And the fetus is a person because it meets the conditions for what are our rights and who gets them. Someone who will at some point be able to conceive and conceptualize rights and reciprocate them. And this is, again, done through the descriptive properties of this conception of what are rights and who gets them. But the question of is something a person at this exact moment is it's a kind of a metaphysical rabbit hole, actually, if you think about it a little bit, because is a sleeping person, a whole person in the same way that an awake person is? And this term is left intentionally ambiguous and is supposed to be kind of defined through like a conceptual analysis where you're supposed to like intuit what a person is. But I don't know if you guys know or not, but intuition is not a very reliable vector whenever we're trying to make consistent rules or deontological limits that can guide us into ethical interactions with other people. So we have to look at this from a descriptive perspective, like we've laid out with what are rights and who gets them, that allows us to address something like this. You have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the person thing is like, well, what's a person? And who says what a person is? Well, this is why this debate never ends, because it's arbitrary. It's a subjective definition. There is no objective source or definition for words in general. And even if you try and define person as a concept, the only non-arbitrary definition you could come up with for a person would be conception, the point of conception. That is the closest non-arbitrary point that you could come up with for what is a person. So because it's just so messy and subjective, I think it's a terrible basis for an argument for being able to end the life of beings. So I guess the rebuttal to the fetus is not a person is that the word person is hopelessly subjective and arbitrary, and any definition of it can necessarily be whittled into nothingness unless it is as non-arbitrary as conception. The strongest of the personhood arguments usually go to things like sentience and other arguments, which we're going to address later. So if we're defining person as other attributes, then we're going to get to those next. So we'll call this we'll call them sub-arguments. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, for the next one, they don't even look human at X stage of development.
Now, you found this on Twitter. This is one of the worst arguments I've ever heard. They don't even look human, therefore I will not reciprocate rights with them, and it's cool to kill them. Why is looking human a standard? That seems hopelessly arbitrary. Also note that other humans throughout history have been dehumanized like slaves. They're not fully human. They're not humans like us. They don't look like us. Therefore, do we assign rights based on looks? It's like, are you insane? I know that's not a counter argument, but there's lots of problems when you just arbitrarily, I guess, do you look, in my opinion, like you? This is not even a strong argument, so it's difficult to argue against, but that's my best attempt. Do you have anything to say on that one?
Yeah, I mean, what it demonstrates is a lack of understanding of what we're actually trying to do here, which is to create a moral framework by which we can non-arbitrarily and consistently address these problems. And there's so much nothing in someone looking a certain way, therefore they get rights, that it's untenable. It's wholly subjective and arbitrary. We could probably think of a couple places in history where they had some pretty strong opinions about how people might look and what they should do about them. So I think it's very clear, but nonetheless, as an argument for why abortion should be allowed. So we decided that it needed to be included here.
Do we have sentience somewhere else in here? Because I feel like that would go into this section and I don't see it. It's kind of like, I
don't believe we have that one specifically.
Yeah, so ANCAP asks, here's a question. Does sentience equate to rights? At what point do cells collectivize to become sentient? Sentient is usually defined as just the ability to sense the world around you. That would be a lot of plants, a lot of animals, a lot of humans, a lot of things can sense the world around them. What about being able to sense the world around you? Sort of puts an onus on us to respect their rights, especially if they're not capable of respecting ours. An example I give in that regard would be, let's say, a squirrel. The squirrel is sentient. It's able to sense the world around it. It's even able to sort of, at least instinctually, in a pre-programmed fashion, plan ahead to a certain extent by hoarding nuts in a tree for winter. Is that enough for me to reciprocate rights? For instance, if I had some food that I owned, obviously, on a table in my backyard, and I had it sitting out there on a table, and I went inside, would that squirrel respect my rights? Would that squirrel reciprocate rights with me? And if it came and stole my food, would I need to continue reciprocating rights with it and not defend myself from it? Like, would I have to allow that squirrel to come take my stuff because, it has rights, even though has no conception of it and doesn't care that I have rights and doesn't care that food was my property? No, of course not. This is a null entity in the realm of moral philosophy. Even though it's sentient, it doesn't reciprocate rights with me. There's no onus on us to afford the squirrel rights because it's sentient. Also, sentience can be a very messy subjective word as well. And any subjectivity, we're going to be railing against subjectivity this entire video, because anytime you introduce subjectivity into arguments, you leave room for manipulation and confusion and harm, like real world harm. And so anytime we find a subjective or arbitrary line, we're going to highlight that as a problem that it is. Christian, would you like to describe why subjectivity is a problem when we're making moral arguments?
Oh boy, would I love to, because I sure had a good time writing about it. not to spend too much time, because I'm sure people are very anxious for us to continue the abortion arguments, but this is very important. Whenever you inject arbitrariness or subjectivity into moral calculus, or really any system whatsoever, you then create an indeterminable amount of error that can come out through your calculations. So the goal of any rational process is to have consistent inputs that produce consistent outputs. And ambiguous or subjective statements are necessarily not predictable, not determinable inputs for these kinds of equations. So if we were to, say, base some kind of theory on whether, or, let's say I'm super terrible at analogies, so I'm just going to keep with it. I use the one that says, like, in the document itself, to become an adult, you must fight a bear barehanded, right? It's just someone chose that for whatever reason. It's indefensible and will produce an unknown set of outcomes because it is in itself subjective and arbitrary. It doesn't have a rational foundation by which it's underpinned. So having these foundations is super important for the construction of any of these ethical systems or any of these ethical determinations, which is what we're looking at now.
Boom. All right, moving on. Hopefully we got it. So, the subjectivity in sentience is what counts as sentient. Like there's a gray area. There's a lot of lines in between. Well, what counts as being able to sense the world around you? What fidelity counts as being able to sense the world around you? Like some plants will, I think, can detect the chemical of an ant being killed or something, and that will change how they, behave. The plants will do things in response to the chemical. Is that sentient? Is that sensing the world around them? Kinda not. This is just a messy kind of useless way to talk about who we should reciprocate rights with.
There's a common argument off of that definition that says thermometers are sentient based off of a couple of definitions of sentient. So, again, there's a lot of weariness that comes in whenever you don't have whenever you use these terms that are ambiguous and need further refining before they really become useful in these kinds of situations.
Opie says no, it's mine.
Oh,
Opie says, I like it over here. Makes you think. That is what we're trying to do with this channel. So I'm glad that that's working for you.
This one.
So let me bookend the sentient stuff. NCAP says, good answer, Patrick. I was asking in terms of conception process, in terms of which point along the process are rights reciprocated with. Going back to our original intro, the only consistent, non-arbitrary point that you start reciprocating rights with somebody is from when they become a living human being. Why human? Not arbitrary because I like humans better than other species, but because we know that most humans go on to become rights reciprocating capable creatures capable of conceptualizing rights and reciprocating with others. And the moment they get on that track to becoming that is the moment then we must begin reciprocating rights with them. Why? To be consistent, because there are other times and points in our life where we're not yet able to reciprocate rights with other people. We have lost or do not currently possess the ability to reciprocate rights with other people, but we still, descriptively remember, we still reciprocate rights with them. Example would be when you're asleep. And Cap, when you go to sleep at night, I don't get to come and take all the stuff in your house and call that not theft, because we still commonly reciprocate rights with people that are asleep, even though they're not really even, they're not able to reciprocate rights in that moment. Same situation when they're let's say in a medically induced coma, you're injured and they need to work on you, so they put you in a coma, or you're injured and you're in a coma and you're unconscious. All of these situations are situations in which you are, for the moment, unable to reciprocate rights with other people, and yet we still choose to reciprocate rights with those people. It would be inconsistent of us to reciprocate rights with the humans that are in those states of not able to reciprocate rights, but not the ones that are not yet born. It's just a matter of location. So the most consistent point in time in which that we should begin reciprocating rights is conception, because that's the moment in time in which you are on track to becoming a rights respecting, not state of nature being, hopefully. unless you're an asshole. But we won't know that until later.
Yeah.
Obviously, life begins at birth. This is the next one. Obviously, life begins at birth. That's why. Oh, I gotta read this in the proper accent.
This is a doozy.
Obviously, this is another one from Twitter, isn't it? Ugh.
Yeah.
Obviously, life begins at birth. That's why we celebrate birthdays and not conception days, and why we don't have funerals following miscarriages. Idiot. Misogynist.
So, just for the end of that one, holy oof. Like, plenty of people have funerals following miscarriages. They're devastating things that ruin people and families. Like, just super insensitive and out of touch to even add that on to the end. But why is it important? So the argument here is that we celebrate birthdays and not conception days. And that demonstrates that we, as I'm assuming a society, as a culture, value the concept of being born more than the concept of being conceived. Therefore, we should place the moral onus on being born, not on being conceived. That's what I see as the rationale or thought process behind this kind of determination. And fundamentally, it's flawed because it's going off of what we choose to value. This goes back to subjectivity. This goes back to arbitrariness. What humans value and what they don't value is based on a confluence of circumstances and conditions that are impossible to predict and most likely impossible to even replicate. Having two humans in the same circumstances will most likely value different things. So the idea of basing an ethical determination off of an aesthetic evaluation or value of a valuation is what I was trying to say of a given time frame versus conception or birth isn't tenable to create a consistent ethical theory that we can draw repeatable results from for us to engage in a happy coexistence with each other.
Yeah, it's the subjectivity of location. So do you get rights when you're in your house, but not when you're out of your house? Well, no, that would be silly. Like, do we reciprocate rights with people that are in their car as opposed to outside their car? What about if they're in their car, but the car's in the garage? Like, the location makes no difference. If we are to be consistent, rights must function the same way in all times and all places and between all people that choose to reciprocate them. The matter of location of inside the womb versus outside is an arbitrary distinction. All right, your turn. Let's do it.
We don't know if the pregnancy would have been viable, and obviously an unviable fetus won't become a human.
I was distracted by a comment. You can go to jail for purposefully breaking an eagle egg at any point of development. So I was just thinking about like a protest video I was watching tonight on Twitter where some lady was like talking about how my guns have more rights than her uterus. And I guess a good response to that would be something like, eagle eggs have more rights than unborn humans. Eagle fetuses, for some reason, have more rights. We don't know if the pregnancy would have been viable, and obviously an unviable fetus won't become a human. I mean, I think if we could detect viability, that would be a factor. Because again, it goes back to like what is on the track to becoming a rights reciprocating creature. And so if we can somehow determine, like, we watch the egg not implant or something on the way out, or, maybe we can tell I'm not sure this science exists, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we could somehow divine if a fertilized egg was viable or not. I think that would be appropriate for this discussion. If it's not on track to being a rights reciprocating creature, then fine. But if it is, then you should reciprocate. What do you think, Christian?
Yeah, and to clarify, I think especially if there's any degree of chance, which it almost certainly would be in these kinds of situations, evictionism would still be like the preferable option, right? It would be like, okay, let's remove this and give it the best chance of life that the baby could possibly have. especially if it's not a guarantee. And hard guarantees in medicine almost don't ever exist. So but the opposite of that, this idea of like, well, it could be unviable, so like we should just think that it is or pretend that it is, doesn't accurately reflect the state of the world. You're living in a fairyland if you just want to make things up as you go along and use them for ethical determinations, right? You know, it's like, oh, I'll just pretend Patrick is a rights violator so I can beat him up, is essentially what's being done here. You're just kind of being willy-nilly with where you apply things, loosey-goosey, one might say, with how you approach these ethical situations. And there's no reason for you to have this sort of leniency towards this, at least not one that's substantiated in this argument.
Kelby, what's up, Kelby? The longest running Disenthrall supporter in the world. Good to see you, Kelby. He's been around for a long time supporting the show. Thank you. He says 9 times out of 10, when I tell people humans can reciprocate rights and animals can't, for example, therefore humans have rights, their counter argument is babies can't reciprocate rights, nor mentally retarded people. Why do they get rights if they can't reciprocate them? Do you want to take that, Christian, or you want me to?
Yeah, so we talked about babies in the beginning, or will become sentient, or will become apperceptive, or will become capable of reciprocating rights, whatever language you'd like to use, because of the descriptive. And forgive me for anybody in the comments if it seems like we're repeating a lot of things. We want to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So it's always good to really drill this stuff in. And that is the number one reason why babies get rights. There is, without a doubt, a lot of contention around this issue specifically because it's not as intuitive from people who are coming outside of this perspective because of the ideas that I talked about earlier, where this idea of like personhood is where the moral calculus is drawn from. And they kind of just like arbitrarily add kids, children, babies to that so that they're covered. Instead of that, this formulation of rights includes a descriptive quality about rights that allows babies, fetuses to be protected and afforded rights until they fail to consent. So.
And then as for like mentally deficient people, I think it's a hard truth that there are certain, that's why I say entities. I don't say humans. I say anybody, any entity. I don't care if like we someday discover a hyper advanced dolphin that has the ability to conceptualize and reciprocate rights. If they can, an AI, let's say, you know, not the one that Google has right now, but let's say in the future we have an AI that is able to conceptualize and fully reciprocate rights somehow. Maybe it's got an android body or something and it can act in the world or whatever, and it reciprocates rights. So be it. To be consistent, we need to reciprocate rights with all entities that are apperceptive of those two capacities. If they're not apperceptive of those two capacities, then there is no onus on you to respect their rights. Now, that's a really harsh thing to say about mentally deficient people. But the point is, we don't allow them to sign contracts for the same reason. We don't contract with them. We don't enter into any other agreements with them. We oftentimes have custodianship contracts with them in a way, sort of making their body property, the custodianship or the property, you might say, in a loose way, the rights of caring for that property and protecting that property are in somebody else's stewardship. That's that situation. So, do they have rights in that situation? Well, the custodian of that body has rights to have their property left alone. So in that way, they're still afforded rights. And also the last thing I'll say is that, look, like we are far from really knowing where on the line someone becomes able to conceptualize things like rights and where the line is where they're able to reciprocate and really understand this stuff and respect our rights. And like if they're actively aggressing against you or damaging your property, well, that sends a pretty clear message, right? But if they're not, we don't know. And we want to be extra freaking careful and give extra margins around this stuff. So if there's any remote chance, and there almost always is a remote chance with mentally deficient people, that they're able to conceptualize this stuff and that they're in there somewhere. And if they're leaving you alone and leaving your stuff alone, then you probably want to leave them alone to be extra sure that you're not, you know, the aggressor, the bad guy in the situation. So that's usually what I say when people approach me with those arguments, but I guess we're tangenting away from abortion, but I think that one was worth it.
Fair enough. And this actually comes in. No, I'm reading. This actually comes in pretty closely, so I think it works out. What if the baby would be born disabled?
I mean, yeah, that's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, disabled here is left vague, so I think maybe we should take this from what if the baby is born with mild autism all the way to horrible medical deficiency, and kind of take those two spectrums, because I do think they are kind of separate issues.
Yeah, to be consistent, we have to apply the same standards as we do for all the other humans. Like, do we reciprocate rights with somebody that is missing a leg or that has trouble breathing or, you know, all these other things? The same standard should apply. If we're going to respect the rights of somebody that is slightly mentally deficient or has Down syndrome, let's say, then there's no different for unborn humans or unborn rights reciprocators, let's say. Also, a lot of the predictions are wrong, and this goes to, you know, wanting to have wide margins around this stuff. Like, if there's any chance that they're going to be capable of being a rights-respecting human, then you should respect their rights. And a lot of the predictions about disabilities, I mean, we hear stories constantly about this stuff. Babies are born, they were told by the doctor that the kid would never survive outside the womb, and it grows up into a normal adult, very thankful that they weren't aborted. So you gotta be really careful when you're dealing with murder, like the difference between murder and, you know, just discarding non-viable cells is kind of a big deal. So you probably want to be extra careful when you're dealing with this stuff. Okay, it's on me now, right? All right, next category.
Yeah.
Rights statements. Here we go.
This is a fun one.
Women, this is the argument. Women have a right to abortions.
Cool. So women have a right to abortions. You'll see this actually taken in a lot of situations, and we won't go into like all of the different ways. We have a right to X, we have a right to Y. I think there's one more specifically on here, and we may touch on this a little bit again. But women have a right to abortions is like an assertion. It is like it's just a thing that they have. They say that they have it. And we already talked about rights are agreements. So let's pretend we wanted to construct this right to abortion. Okay. What are the two parties involved that we would have to come to an agreement to make this happen? Based off of our conception of what rights are and who gets them, you would have to have a contract between the mother and the fetus itself, the baby, that says you can abort me. If you could make that happen by some means, one, that's incredible. And two, then you could have a quote unquote right to abortion. This would be essentially an assisted suicide at that point. But we're living in fairyland in this hypothetical. This doesn't happen. This is why the issue exists. If babies in the womb could contract with their mothers, then we would be having a completely different conversation on on abortion specifically. So for this to ever be true, we would have to live in a non-reality. Now, that being said, we do live in reality. So there is no right to abortion because rights are agreements, and the parties necessary to make this right cannot come to an agreement with one another.
The thing that bothers me is the assertion of a reified concept called rights. So if somebody said, I have a right to abortion, I would be like, cool, Pixar didn't happen. Show it to me. And obviously they can't because it's just a concept. And so what they're actually saying is, I demand that you respect and reciprocate my right to perform abortions on babies in my uterus. And, you know, do you have that right? Certainly only with people that would reciprocate that with you. A lot of people will not. So do you consider that having that right? That's up to you, I guess. But that's the difference. That's the problem with the property-esque language around rights. Do they have that right? Well, no, they don't have it because it's not property. It doesn't exist as a concept. It's a mutual agreement with people. So if they surround themselves by people that are cool with that, maybe you could use that language, but it's messy. So that language bothers me. The next one. Oh, sorry, it's your turn.
Women have a right to birth control.
Oh, well, same thing, right? So
there's a bit of nuance here, though. So I think,
well, yeah. So again, they're asserting that they have the right to purchase and own property called birth control. And I would generally reciprocate that agreement. You have the right to own property. I don't get a say in what property you peacefully own, just like I demand that you don't interfere with my ability to own property, even if you don't like it. Let's say guns, for example. I don't need your permission. I don't care if you disapprove of the gun property and don't want me to have it. I still demand that you respect my ownership of guns, and I would reciprocate in kind. Yeah, I think... I'm trying to think of like a kind of property I would disagree. Let's say a nuclear weapon. I would, well, that's a bad example because there's safety concerns involved. But like, I don't go around asserting myself on you, Christian, that I get a say and you need to give me an itemized list of the property you own and I'll check the boxes on the ones that I find okay. No, we generally have a reciprocated respect for each other's property as long as you do it peacefully. As long as you're not threatening or harming people with your property, I don't care. And that is the rights reciprocation that we're talking about here. And that also is the linchpin. The hinging point is peacefully own, not using your property to harm people. I don't care if you have a gun, as long as you're not hurting innocents with it. In fact, I kind of want you to have a gun so you can protect yourself as an innocent person. And the moment you become not an innocent person by hurting people, I no longer reciprocate your right to own that gun. Same exact thing with birth control. I don't give a shit what you own, as long as you don't hurt anybody with it, including babies. Unless you were, even if you were raped and that goes to eviction like we were talking about. There's also certain circumstances where the life of the mother is involved, and we'll get to those later. We have them in here as well. But women have a right to birth control. We all have a right to any property we want to peacefully own. So sure. And have a right, again, the same, pedantic problems with that language. You have anything on that, Christian?
Right. Yeah, just to clarify, because this is something that a lot of people from the pro-abortion crowd will harp on. It's like, oh, they're coming for the birth control next. Just to be clear, I don't want to weify us too much, but I don't see any issue with birth control that prevents conception, because everything we've talked about is hinging on the idea of conception. There is only an issue with birth control whenever conception has already become a thing, or birth control that's specifically targeted at fertilized eggs, for example. So it would be, admittedly, it would be extremely difficult to say that someone using a particular birth control resulted in the abortion of a fertilized egg or whatever. But that would still be an ethical violation if they used a type of birth control for that purpose. As long as you're preventing fertilization of the egg and there's no conception happening, then you seem to be fine based on the moral calculus. So
yep, agreed. That was a good thing to catch. Somebody in the comments says, and what exactly are those rights? Well, I mean, I don't think there's a way for us to avoid really getting into rights, because this is all what we're talking about. So I'm going to take a moment to digress on that. And what are the rights? Which is a different question from what are rights. And this confuses a lot of people when I talk about the two. We can talk about what rights are, which is what we've already discussed. And we can talk about what the rights are. What are the rights on the list of rights that we reciprocate with people? What are they? Whatever you choose for them to be, and whatever you can find people around you to reciprocate with you. You could conceptually probably have a right to being served coffee every morning if you could find somebody to reciprocate that right with you and come to your house and serve you coffee every morning. And if you're able to find somebody to reciprocate that agreement with, you could call that a right, though that's really not how we usually think of it. But if they're just reciprocal agreements with people, we make those all the time. And the only difference between the normal everyday reciprocal agreements we have with people and rights is really just kind of like tradition and some sense of auspiciousness that we assign to certain reciprocal agreements we have with people. Fundamental stuff like body property, don't hit me, don't hurt me, don't take my stuff. Like, these are pretty foundational. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that question. What are the rights? There's pretty standard. There's a standard list of them that I probably don't need to list for you.
I would say just
Go ahead.
Just to add just a little bit to that, I would say the prime right would be consent, because without consensual interaction, there is no capacity for any ethical foundation or anything to be built up from. You have to have consent as the negate of the state of nature. Read more about that at antisubjectivism.com.
Consent and property.
That's
consent and
consent
property.
and property.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't have any of the other any other rights added to the list until you start with those two. So those would be the quintessential consent and property, and they're kind of intertwined. You can't really have consent without something to consent to or for, and you can't have property without the consent of the people around you, consenting to or agreeing to respect that property. So it's kind of like they're kind of the same thing, but at very least they're mutually dependent, and you can't have either without both. Yep. Is it my turn? I don't remember.
Yes, I believe so.
Even children don't have the same rights as adults. How could a fetus be said to have the same rights as women?
So this is interesting, but we've already done a lot to, I think, answer this one. But it is a bit more interesting than some of the others, because it's kind of taking like an observation of the way that we interact with other people, and trying to draw some kind of conclusion from that, in saying that, well, look, children can't go out and do whatever they want like an adult can, as long as they're, not hurting anybody, right? And they are then interpreting that to say, how could you possibly say that a fetus or baby has the same rights as a full adult woman? And this comes back to what are rights and who gets them. We're going to be really drumming this one home. Everybody's going to know what are rights and who gets them by the end of this stream.
Hopefully.
Because hopefully we afford all of these different categories the same level of rights. And if you are treating your children as if they don't have the same rights as you, that is also a problem. There obviously are certain circumstances where you may say a child isn't necessarily as independent of an agent as like an adult, but this has more to do with mental faculties and how they interact with the world than it does what rights they're afforded. You can't beat your kids for the same reason you can't beat an adult, for the same reason you can't beat a fetus or a baby. And you can't kill your kids for the same reasons you can't kill an adult, for the same reason that you can't kill a baby. It's that straightforward.
It's the same responsibility that you have to your child children as you do to your unborn children. You are a custodian of their property until they are able to take agency over that property. The best example I can give you is like, let's say you, like somebody gives you their Rolex and says, "Hey, I need you to take good care of this for me. I'll be back in a month." Like, you have taken custodianship over that property, and you have a responsibility to treat that property in the way that its owner would want to be treated until such time as its owner can take agency over that property again. Same thing with kids. Like, we have a responsibility taken on by our choice to create them in this world, to do our best to treat their property and to protect that property in the way at which their adult self would look back and appreciate and consent to. Like, when our children hit adulthood, you should be able to ask them, son or daughter, are you happy with how I raised you? And you should get a resounding yes from them. And they should give you, show you in retrospect their consent to what happened. You didn't hurt them. You didn't, let's say, circumcise them. All these different things that a lot of people do to their children that they shouldn't. When they hit adulthood, they should look at you and be able to consent to what you did with their property while it was in your custodianship or while it was in your temporary possession. And there is no non-arbitrary line between when they're 15 years old, 5 years old, 1 year old, 3 months old in utero. Like, there is no non-arbitrary line there. You have the same responsibility to their property the entire time. It's sort of like a responsibility to their adult self when you're finally able to absolve yourself of the custodianship over the property that you created in a state of dependence on you. Let's not forget that point of agency when we're talking about creating children. You created a life in a state of dependent peril. They are dependent on you for protection, for nourishment, for resources, from the moment they're conceived until they're old enough to take it on for themselves. You are responsible and in a custodianship of their property for them. That is my rant on that.
Cool. Abortion is a decision between a woman and her doctor. It's no one else's business. Everyone has a right to privacy. You did a funny reread on this one before that I think might be actually useful to come back to.
Yeah. Murder is a decision between a man and his assassin. It's no one else's business. Everyone has a right to privacy. It's like, okay. I mean, this is nonsense. First of all, we can start with right to privacy, as if right to privacy, like if you do any other crime in existence privately, if, everyone will just sort of look the other way. Like, no, number one, that's not how privacy works. Number two, see everything we've already said about rights, not being things that you can just assert without finding people to reciprocate with you. And also, like, just substituting murder and assassin just kind of illustrates the absurdity of it. Like, you can't just say, oh, I'm doing this murder privately, so you don't get an opinion on this murder, I'm doing it privately. You're just nonsense. It's a hilarious argument. All right. I'm not sure where we can go with this, but maybe this is a good one for me to read to you because I think you have a better idea than I do. It's just, this is something someone said, I have the right, end statement. EN statement.
Yeah, so what I took from this is basically these general, I have the right to, I have the right to my body, and so therefore I have the right to remove the fetus, etc. This is kind of like a catch-all for all of these I have the right inserts. And I'm going to come back to what Patrick said, which is, okay, prove it. If you have the right, if you have the agreement between the two parties that are listed in this interaction, then all you have to do is demonstrate that, and then sure, we can be okay with that. Consent is maintained and everything's fine. But if you're just asserting into the wild blue yonder that, oh, I have this right, not only does no one have to care, it's probably not true. You should be able to demonstrate in some capacity, because these are happening between two consenting agents, that you can you have this right to do XYZ thing. Whether it's to, I don't know, to evict, to abort, whatever you want to say it is, you should be able to demonstrate that instead of just having to assert it.
Someone in the comments says, it's no one else's business. The child would like a word with you. That's a good point. All right.
So this one, this is a fun one. Everybody knows this one. My body, my choice, Patrick. My body, my choice.
I mean, this is taken literally, absent the context of all of this stuff. Yeah, I agree. I generally reciprocate that with everyone around me. It is your body. It is your property. You have rightful control over it. Just like I would say, we already kind of talked about this. Christian, that is your gun. I don't like AKs. I prefer ARs, but hey, it's your property. Your property, your choice. Your gun, your choice. Fine. But the moment you point it at somebody and threaten them or attack somebody with it, I no longer have to respect your right to that property or to your body property. I can defensively use force against you to prevent you from using your property in a way that hurts other people. Let me say that again. Is there a better way to say this? You can use your property however you want. This is how property rights are generally reciprocated, and certainly how I reciprocate them with everybody. You can use y'all's property however you want, as long as you don't use that property to threaten or hurt other people or their property. It's that simple. And so, my body, my choice. Yes, as long as you don't use your body or your property to hurt anybody else. Unfortunately for you, the baby is somebody else. So you don't get to use your body in that way. That is not a choice that I will reciprocate for you to have. And I would expect that you guys would do the same for me if I started using my body or property to hurt other people. So
the inverse of this also applies. Not my body, not my choice, right? And like we've said over and over again, the baby in this circumstance should be afforded rights. It's not your body. It's not your choice. You have to engage in a consensual agreement with them for any of this to happen. So saying my body, my choice doesn't matter because we're not even really talking about your body. I mean, we are kind of tangentially, but it's almost secondary to the actual topic at hand. You just happen to be there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next category. We're moving right along. Abortion as healthcare or improving life. These are very common. Maybe the most common abortion arguments. The first one is abortion is healthcare, Christian.
So this is kind of like the big wide open one that a lot of people will say, like, hey, abortion, you know, it's not anything. It's just healthcare, right? It's like the same as having your tonsils removed or something like, it's just healthcare. It's like going to the dentist, right? There's a lot of different implications that we can get out of this, most of which we're actually going to be covering because this is one of the longer sections, if not the longest in this whole thing. And there's no circumstance where murder is healthcare. I want to make that very clear. It's quite antithetical to the concept of healthcare, actually, to be engaged in the murder of someone. So whenever we see this, it's so ridiculous, it kind of makes me pause for a second. But again, coming back to where we started with all this, if you take the position that the fetus is not a person, is not any kind of moral consideration, then I could totally understand why someone would say, like, oh, it's just like removing your tonsils or something silly like that, because they don't have all of the cards on the table. They don't have, for whatever reason, they don't have everything put together in a way that would make it clear that what they're doing is killing someone and not improving their quality of life necessarily. So.
Yeah, and just another reminder to the audience, because we have a lot of new people that have joined. At the end of the show, we're going to be doing a call-in session where you guys are able to join our Discord and challenge us. So if you have counter arguments or just things you want to say, join our Discord, and at the end of the show, we will bring you on to give us the arguments that we missed or to give us rebuttals that we didn't cover for you here today. There's a link in the description, disenthrall.me/platforms. You can find a link to join our Discord there. And my producer Fallstar and main voice will be ready to help you out. Another shout out, again, all support that we receive, all donations that we receive to the super chat link in the description at Streamlabs will be going to help my producer out today. All donations that we get today will be going to my producer Fallstar to help him out for all of his thankless work, helping bring this channel's content to you. So please consider donating to support Fallstar today. Andrew is an awesome guy. All right, let us continue.
Here we go. This is a good one. What about a woman whose life is threatened by pregnancy or childbirth?
Yeah, so I think that's a valid exception to the rule. Like certainly, let me figure out how to best word this. Feel free to share your thoughts if you have something prepared while I think through it.
There's a couple different ways you could come at it. I don't want to step all over yours. So. Well, I think the first place to start. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was trying to pick the best analogy to illustrate the point because analogies are really illustrative for this stuff. So. And I was thinking about the baseball one. So like, if we're playing a baseball game and I knock a ball accidentally farther, than the field and it breaks a window on somebody's property, they don't get to come out and shoot me. And if they do come out to shoot me, I can certainly defend myself. And so I'm trying to draw the analogy from the baseball analogy to the baby causing exceptional risk or harm to the mother in this case. Nobody consents to that. Not usually. I mean, certainly, I guess you could, if you're a mother, you could, and they do actually. There's mothers that, get cancer in the middle of their pregnancy and they choose to not take chemo to place the life of the baby over their own. And they choose to sacrifice their own life to continue the pregnancy to the point where the baby can be born, even though it's, a death, assured death for the mother. Those people are heroic. but that is certainly not a moral obligation. You're not when the attempt at creating life turns into killing you, then that is something that you should be able to use defensive force. And that goes back to the evictionism discussion that we led with. So hopefully that analogy is the most descriptive. If not, let me know and I'll try a better one. What do you think, Christian?
Right. So it's kind of like, what's a good way of, I've heard an analogy of this sort that equates it to like a burning building. So let's say you're both inside of a burning building, right? And there is one way out and only one of you can make it, right? You're not a bad person for jumping out that window and the other person not being able to make it out. You know, you were just that split second before the building exploded or something. You're not responsible for these because you were not the one who put the situation that resulted in these kinds of circumstances at hand. So it is difficult though, because it does come off like a kind of like a feely exception to the rule, but there are situations where we can kind of draw out the understanding that there is something outside of the engagement between these two that is resulting in the outcomes that we have. So
BZ in with a super chat. He says, character holding their head in their hand saying, "You're my number one." Thanks for the super chat. And thanks for donating to support Fallstar and his excellent work in producing and helping us produce this show. Remember that if you donate through YouTube super chat, we only get about half of your money. Google gets the other half. So if you're looking to buy Google steak dinner, keep using YouTube's super chat. If you want more of the money to go to us, there's a link in the description to Streamlabs where you can, I think, use PayPal and other stuff and we get like 98% of that or whatever. So thank you for your super chat. Okay. Next, is it my turn?
I believe so.
Oh, yes. This is a very common one. Even if abortion were made illegal, there would still be many abortions. Also, we get, if abortion is made illegal, tens of thousands of women will again die from back alley and clothes hanger abortions.
This is another one that you can kind of reread like you did before. Even if, murders were made illegal, there would still be many murders. It's like, okay, yes, the world is a bad place and people will do bad things. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have any of the well-founded ethics and just throw that all out the window because people are going to keep doing it. We have a term for these people. They're called the state of nature beings. They don't care about consenting or reciprocating rights. So
if we make it harder on murderers to murder, more of them will hurt themselves in the process of attempting to murder. Okay. This is not the counter argument you thought it was.
It all comes back to the valuation that the mother is worth more than the baby. That's where all of this comes from. That's the only way that this statement makes any sort of sense, is if you assert that from the beginning. And in this particular case, there has to be some kind of substantiation to it. And I promise you're not going to find it because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that is a particularly funny argument. It's one of those ones where the left thinks they got you when they give that to you, and you're like, okay, yeah, they'll get hurt, trying to hurt people. They might get hurt. Gosh, that's terrible. I wouldn't want people that hurt people to get hurt. What are you talking about? Okay, your turn.
I got one straight out of the Zoomers for you.
Oh,
Carrying
really?
a baby is mentally traumatic, and abortion is justified for mental health reasons.
Gosh, I'm so glad I don't have to be culpable for my actions. I can take on responsibilities, and then when they strain my tiny little brain's mental capacities and my feels start to get injured and upset, I can just withdraw my consent to that responsibility and walk away from it. Oh, gosh. Like, being thought of as a murderer is just so, just mentally and emotionally taxing. Like, as soon as I pull the trigger and fire the bullet, man, I'm just withdrawing my consent to whatever happens afterwards. I'm just going to walk away so that no one can think of me like a murderer, because that's just mentally taxing. It's like, we're culpable for the effects of our actions, and if the effects of your actions entail something that makes your emotional fifis get taxed, or if you put yourself in a harder situation, well, you did that. You put yourself in that harder situation, and you got to own it. You got to own it. You can't walk away from your responsibilities or from the culpability for your actions. What do you have to say to the Zoomers?
Oh, I think grow up. That's what I would say to the Zoomers.
Yeah. What number are we on? Are we halfway through?
I think we're about halfway. Some of the ones at the end are a bit longer, but I think we're about halfway through the list.
All right. You can't oppose abortion if there are poor people in the world. Also, the baby would have been born into terrible poverty.
The implications of this one are quite massive, because what they're saying here is, we can kill poor people, right? Why can't we kill poor? They're poor. Who wants to be poor?
We don't want to let them continue to be poor. That's got to be miserable.
Oh, God. Imagine being poor. Imagine being poor in the richest country on planet Earth. Must be just the worst possible thing you could imagine. Worse than not even existing. Okay. In seriousness, the idea here is that they're trying to make like an empathetic approach to say that this baby could be born into circumstances which are just not good. They're just not good circumstances. That's sad. It could be very true even that a baby could be born in circumstances that are very harsh and bad. But it does not change the moral calculus whatsoever. You don't get to say like, okay, well, this guy will probably hate his life a little bit, or maybe not, but maybe they will. So let's just kill him. Let's just kill him. Let's just, then they won't hate their lives because they won't have one. They'll just be dead.
Imagine the hubris of judging for someone else if their life was worth the challenges that come with living. I just imagine just having that hubris, just the gall to be like, I am going to determine if you get to live based on my predictions on whether the strife you might be subjected to will be worth it. and this goes for all of them. Like, oh, well, if you don't let people kill their babies, then they'll be born to parents that don't want them, so they'll be abused. Okay, so well, first of all, being abused is not as bad as being murdered, first of all. Second of all, there's lots of people that have been abused and they've grown up and they love life and they're glad that they weren't aborted. You don't get to judge that for them. Those are my thoughts on that one.
Yeah. The last 3 decades of abortion rights have helped make our society a better place to live.
There's a book that makes the case, and I still can't remember the name of the book. It was an economics book, but it made the case that the overall decline in violent crime was due to abortions over the last 50 years. And that's the strongest case I've seen. I think I've seen more recent arguments that kind of debunk that and go the other direction, and come up with other causes for the decline in crime. And maybe it's a mix of both. Maybe it's true. Let's say it's 100% true. Let's say 100% of the decline in crime is due because all the poors got to kill their children and they didn't raise a bunch of poor people who we know are most of the violent people. I'm being facetious and sarcastic here. I'm going to get clipped and this is going to be terrible. But let's just say it's 100% true. You don't get to kill someone to make yourself safer. Right? Like, you guys agree with that, right? Like, that's a pretty obvious one, right? Like, I'm going to kill all these random innocent people. It's like pre-killing so that I can hopefully on average, maybe be stolen from less, in the next year or something like that. If so, I shouldn't be saying this. No, I'm not going to say this. There are certain people that would be way more effective at reducing the amount of force and theft that happens to you for you to kill other than babies.
You can connect the dots there.
Did I go too far? I think I'm safe.
Nah, it's fine. It's fine.
If you wanted to kill people to reduce the amount you're stolen from, there's better people than little unborn children. Okay. How was that? Do I still have a YouTube channel? Are we still here?
You're still live for now. We'll see how long that lasts.
Okay. I'm not advocating that you do that, mind you. There, covered. Hashtag. Okay.
Minecraft server resets next week.
Yeah. In Minecraft. This is all in Minecraft. Okay. Somebody said, I'm glad we started this at almost midnight Texas time on a Friday night. Yeah. Yeah. How hard are you? Are you soft? Are you hard? This channel's for hard people. Very hard people. Phrasing. Okay. What are we doing right now? The last 3 decades of abortion rights have... I already did that one. Okay, my turn.
This
abortion
is one of my least favorites. Oh, shit. Here we go.
Do you want me to take it or you... Okay.
No, go for it. Go.
Abortion is an easy and painless procedure. I can't believe somebody wrote these words. Is this real?
This is straight out of Twitter.
Here it is, folks. Abortion is an easy and painless procedure, arguably easier than being born.
Okay, so before I dig on this, I'm going to say that this is the same kind of calculus that goes into like, oh, wouldn't you want to be poor or whatever? Some person has projected that their life sucks and they hate it. And they're saying like, hey, you probably should just be aborted. It's probably way better. That's the mental gymnastics. It's not a calculus. That's the mental gymnastics that are going on here to justify that one. Holy shit. Somebody wrote that and they mean it.
Yep.
Wow. Arguably easier than being born. I don't know about you, but I think being alive is one of the best things ever. I think it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me because I wouldn't be here without it. So maybe not everybody feels the same, but that's a determination that they get to make on their own. You random Twitter edgelord do not get to make the determination that somebody else doesn't need to live because it might suck. That is not your place. It never has been. Wow. Just think about what the results would be if you applied this sort of mentality consistently. Just think. There's so many ramifications to this. It's mind-boggling.
Alfredo says, best way to spend a Friday night is watching a couple master debaters going hard. Welcome to Disenthrall. All right.
Yeehaw.
Yeah, my turn. You want to read it?
Yeah, sure. Oh, do you have any thoughts on that one? The absolute gem that it was?
I mean, it's kind of a stupid thing to even argue about, but stupid is not an argument, so I will craft one. It's wrong because being stabbed in the skull and having your brain sucked out probably hurts more than being squeezed out of a tube. Also, having your limbs torn off, probably less painful than being squeezed through a tube. I just think it's a really dumb thing to say on its face because it's factually very likely inaccurate. Having saline injected that burns your flesh until you die from it, probably more painful than being squeezed through a vagina. So, okay, hopefully we've dealt with that one.
Fair to say. Okay, we got one from Bill Gates here. This is not actually from him. That was a joke. This is from Twitter, once again. Abortion helps solve the problem of overpopulation and raises the quality of life.
Yeah, so that's the arguments the Nazis used. They wanted to raise the quality of life and, manipulate the population to a status that they felt was better than the alternatives. And so they just, off a bunch of people. It's the same argument. You get to murder people to make your life better. Okay, psychopath. I know that's not an argument, but that's the moral philosophy behind this is that you are justified to murder people to improve your life. Am I oversimplifying that? I don't think I am.
That's the state of nature. That's might makes right. It's literally, I hit you on the head and take your coconut. That's all it is.
It also presumes overpopulation's an actual problem, which, but that's a practicality. That's a practical argument that's neither here nor there. Even if it was a problem, you still don't get to kill people at its behest. And here's the thing, like a lot of these arguments presuppose that abortion is not murder. And so if abortion's not murder and it's like an aesthetic, subjective, just kind of life decision, just like, which car to buy, then these arguments make a lot more sense. But the left can't understand, for some reason, a lot of the left, at least, that I've talked to and that I've seen, especially all over Twitter, they don't get that fundamental point that the moral judgment of abortion is murder. Because all these arguments just become absurd when you add that into the equation. Murder helps solve the problem of overpopulation and raises the quality of life. That's the translation. Psychopath. Moving on.
You can... oh, okay. I just read... Did I read that one? I think so.
Yeah. Next one is most aborted baby.
I get the landmine.
We can trade if you want.
No. I'm fine.
Okay. Most aborted babies are black. They're the most economically in need of abortions, Christian.
As a white man, I would like to say that please don't cancel me. So what's happening here for this argument is they're making an observation that the black community I'm not making any judgments out of this. I'm just communicating what they're saying. The black community are the ones most economically in need of abortions, and they gain as a community, as a whole, as a collective, whatever the fuck that is, from having access to abortions. Again, that can be true. They may gain something somewhere, somehow from the access to abortions. It does not justify murdering somebody. There's a big trend in all of these quality of life ones that say, oh, it would be better if we could just kill these people. And it's like, no, you don't get to just kill them to make things a little bit better. That's not how we deal with these problems. That's the state of nature. That's not ethics. That's not consent. You wouldn't do that in any other kind of situation. You're just crafting one so that you can make it happen here. Any of the facts of the matter of this could be true or false, and it changes nothing about the moral calculus.
Well, there's moral philosophies. Go ahead, yeah.
I just wanted to take one more second, because I think this is a super important point to address here. A lot of people will get super into the weeds on both sides about the facts of the matter surrounding these things. Like, oh, well, does the black or African American community gain from having access to abortions? None of that matters. It doesn't matter at all. So if you're engaged in these kinds of conversations, analyze when facts of the matter actually matter, which is very rare in the context of this conversation, and when the moral calculations behind it matter, and focus on where the actual problem is. Because it doesn't matter if anything about the statement is true outside of whether or not the ethics are sound. That determines the entire thing. It could be good, bad, whatever. It could be anything in between. It doesn't change what's happening. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, Ryan says, well, when you put it that way, Patrick. Made me laugh. What else? Somebody's asking, how is abortion murder? We covered that in the first 20 minutes of the stream. Rewind to see those arguments. I'm not going to put everybody through it again. We're going to be here for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Your turn.
You don't know their situation.
Yeah, you don't know my situation. I needed to kill him. You don't judge me. You know my situation. Again, this is the same argument. Like when you substitute murder, you don't judge me. You don't know my situation. I needed that job, so I had to kill that guy that was trying to compete with me for my job. You don't know my situation. This justifies murder. This justifies crime. In no other situation is this ever used. In no other crime is this used other than this one. You don't know their situation. That doesn't work anywhere else, so it doesn't get to work here. All right. The next category, circumstances. Here we go. You ain't know me. Yeah. The circumstances of many women leave them no choice but to have an abortion. This is kind of what we just talked about.
Yeah, the no choice part is one that I see quite a bit, though, that I think warrants addressing. A lot of people say, oh, I'm compelled to have an abortion. I have to have an abortion. There's no other way. I'm assuming, and this is not the philosophical analysis part of this, but I'm assuming most of these people are being extremely hyperbolic when they say there's no option other than to have an abortion at all. There's no adoption. There's no just fucking raising the child. None of that. They have to have an abortion for whatever reason may be. maybe there is a circumstance, I'm not going to say there is none, where you like must have an abortion. Maybe one of those life-threatening circumstances that we talked about, and that would be an eviction anyways. But the overwhelming majority of circumstances do not lead to a no choice scenario, and you never had a choice in it to begin with. It's not your body that's actually a concern here in 99.9% of pregnancies. Your choice is irrelevant, because what we're talking about is consent and reciprocation of rights. No one cares what you have to think unless you have an agreement or a contract with the other party involved. It's literally your opinion, man.
Yeah, I would do what you did. I would just relate it to any other crime and say, look, when one person kills another and the investigation is carried out, there's a very short list of acceptable reasons for you to be able to kill someone. And it's almost always self-defense or property defense or, defense of another in the course of a felony, let's say, related. It's a very short list of excuses or justifications for killing somebody. And none of those are, the ones where you don't have choice are usually the ones where you're protecting your life or property. You had no other way, you had no less violent way of preventing that person from killing you or hurting you or taking your stuff than to kill them. That's the short list. And I think that applies for like the life of the mother being in peril. And we kind of already talked about that stuff earlier. I think that's actually probably a better analogy than the baseball one I used. So, okay. It's your turn. Sorry. Yep.
Those kids won't be smiling when they are born into families that never wanted them.
Yeah, we kind of covered this one earlier, so I won't spend much time on it. But this is what I said earlier, where you don't get to judge the value and the utils and the happiness of another person's life and then kill them based on your projected judgment of their suffering or lack thereof. We don't do that at any other time. We don't do that with anyone that's already born. So it's inconsistent and subjective and arbitrary to do it while they're still inside the womb. I won't repeat all the earlier arguments. That's what I have to say on that one. Okay. I have a great career. I personally do not like this one. I have a great career, Christian, only because I aborted my baby.
Sorry, I have a great career because I killed my son.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I caught that clearly. Yeah, I mean, so under this sort of calculation, I said calculation so many times. Take a shot, actually, if you're going through this from now on, how many times I said calculation. Rip to you. Theoretically, you could draw this out if I was being a little bit uncharitable and say like, oh, well, your toddler is getting in the way of the progression of your career. It was 86. Your career comes first, right? The life of your baby. Who cares about that? What matters is you moving up the corporate ladder. Right. Obviously, this is bankrupt. It's bankrupt. It's like the most selfish might makes right way of doing things. It's like this person is in the way of me accomplishing this objective, so I'll just kill them, and then I won't have to worry about them getting in the way of the objective anymore. Might makes right. That's what lions and wolves and all those things do, and we don't reciprocate rights with them. This is a great way to become a state of nature being if you live by this mantra.
Yep. I just blocked somebody from chat for the first time in years that were talking about ways for parents to kill their babies. Like, sorry, that's
cringe.
We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that here. Do that elsewhere. Thanks. All right. So,
I think I'm reading this one. It would be very inconvenient.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What's up? Were you reading chat?
I was reading more chat. Go ahead. You're fine.
No, yeah. I was just going to the next question. Here, you get or next thing.
Those kids won't be smiling when they are. Oh wait, I already read that one. No, it's your turn. It's your turn.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, it would be very inconvenient for the mother. Is what I said.
Yep. Same thing.
I think that comes. Yeah.
Same thing as the career. Yeah. It would be really inconvenient for me not to. it's hard to talk about this stuff and risk being clipped or banned. An analogy would be, that's totally an analogy. I'm not suggesting this at all, but it would be really convenient if I would off the heads of my homeowners association. Like it would be really way more convenient for me. Like they are up my ass. It would be so much more convenient. I'm not, obviously, I'm just making an analogy of the absurdity here. You apply the moral judgment of murder to it and it becomes very crystal clear. Okay. Next one, the last one in this category. Abortion rights are fundamental for the advancement of women. They are essential to having equal rights with men.
Okay, so we come back to what are rights and who gets them. What are these rights that men have that women don't have in this particular circumstance? Now, what they're claiming is that this is one that you'll hear. Actually, we maybe should have included this, and it's not in here. So I'm going to talk about it now. The only reason people want to have abortion rights is so that they can treat women like property, like subhumans, so that they can control them. Right? This is essentially what this is getting on. It's just much more, passive aggressive language for the same kind of idea. No. I don't have the right to kill the baby. You don't have the right to kill the baby. We are equal. We are equal in the moral circumstances coming on here. There is no hidden agenda. There is no women are property. There's none of that nonsense. This is literally just putting together the Lego bricks that we've laid out through this entire stream and saying, oh, this one does not fit. All right, we got to throw it out.
Men don't have the right to kill anyone or murder anyone, so women don't have the right. That's equality. Ta-da.
Ta-da. This one we can actually probably speed through because some of these are mega cringe. But
yep. Next category is tax/government.
The anti-abortion beliefs of the minority shouldn't be imposed on the majority.
So flip that around and you'll see the absurdity of democracy on moral issues. So the let's say the anti-abortion beliefs of the majority shouldn't be infringed upon by the minority. Like, so if the tables were turned, and I think it might actually be the majority, they're just not votey enough or something. They don't vote. Like if the majority was anti-abortion, would that be justified? No. Now we're going to get into the illegitimacy of democracy as a form of government. Also, this is an appeal to majority in terms of logical fallacies. The number of people for something lends no validity or soundness to the argument.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of this sort of thing. These ad populums are literally everywhere in this conversation. Like, oh, XYZ appealed to the government. So there you go.
Pro-lifers don't care about women, and they don't care about babies once they're born. They have no right to speak against abortion unless they're willing to care for these children. This is a really common one.
We're using that word right again, but I'm going to charitably say they mean it in a different context. But so you'll see this a lot. And the claim that's being made here is that, like, oh, you care so much about the life of my baby. Why don't you take it? Why don't you take it? No one has any onus to take someone's child from another person so that the child isn't murdered. That's like a weird hostage exchange, right? Like, oh, I'll kill this hostage unless you take him away from me. That's essentially what's being done here. It's not any kind of out to the culpability of if they still were to go through with the abortion. None of that would stand. Just because no one came to take the child from them, that's completely out of whack.
Again, this is really easy to clarify. Anti-murderers don't care about murderers, and they don't care about victims either. They have no right to speak against murder unless they're willing to care for the victims. Like, just don't murder people. That doesn't mean I take responsibility for everybody you were going to murder. That's dumb. What are you saying? It's obviously silly.
Here's another super common one. The anti-abortionists are a bunch of men telling women what to do, or men don't get opinions on abortion.
So what we're doing here is making arguments. Arguments don't have sex or gender, if you want to use that term. Arguments are arguments. They stand on their own. They are concepts in the mind. Concepts don't have gender or sex either. If I put an argument out there, it stands or fails on its own merit. And to assert that the person making the argument is causal in whether or not the argument is valid or sound this is a really common fallacy that you've all heard of. It's the, oh my God, my brain went blank. What's the fallacy where you attack the person making the argument as a way to defeat the argument? Oh my God.
Ad hominem.
Oh my God, it's the most common fallacy and I lost it. I couldn't even remember it. I mean, it's quintessential ad hominem when you're saying that the person making the argument has a bearing on the validity or soundness of the argument. Most people, when they see somebody insulting somebody else, they're like, stop ad homing. Most of the time that's not ad homing. That's just not making arguments at all. That's just name calling. That's nothing. An ad hominem is when you say you're wrong not because anything's wrong with the argument or your evidence for the argument, but because you're ugly. That's an ad hominem. Your argument is wrong because you're ugly. In this case, it's your argument about abortion is wrong because you have a dick. Okay, well, that's non sequitur.
Well, hold on now, Patrick. It's 2022. Okay. That's not, just because you have a dick doesn't.
No.
Sorry.
No.
My bad.
Yeah. So we're making arguments here. They're not male arguments. They're arguments. They're not female arguments. They're not trans arguments. They're just arguments. Attacking who we are and the person making them is an actual ad hominem, which is not a valid counter argument. All right. The anti-abortionists distort the facts and resort to emotionalism to deceive the public, Christian. Emotionalism.
Ooh, we got some pot kettle going on here. So I don't think anything we've done here is emotionalism. In fact, I think we've gone as far as possible to separate ourselves from any level of emotionalism. It'd be a very different kind of stream. If you want to see an emotionalist take on this sort of thing, there's plenty of conservative Republican YouTube channels that I sure are doing that right now. What we've done is presented the facts. We've presented a model of ethical interaction that we can build off of, and we've put two and two together. There is no magic spell happening. There is no dust and sand in the eyes that's trying to obfuscate something here. There are plenty of people on both who agree with this position, who have emotional opinions on both sides of the spectrum. Some people who agree that abortion is wrong would have an emotional leniency that maybe they think, it would be better if it was okay. And some people are on the other side, that they have an emotional leaning, but that has nothing to do on their bearing. And this is just trying to discredit an argument that we are not presenting. So.
Yeah, we're not, at no point in the proof of abortion is murder do we say,
it feels bad.
A female is required to make this proof. The person making the proof is male. Therefore, the proof is, it's like, this is dumb. Anyway.
Here's another one. Abortion reduces welfare costs to taxpayers.
We've already covered this. It's murdering people reduces welfare costs to taxpayers. I'm sorry, you don't get to murder people for the social good unless you're like a consequentialist there are moral philosophies to support all of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, arguably moral philosophies. Yeah.
Facts. But it's not the one that we laid out in the beginning. Oh, my turn. Sorry. Many religious organizations and people of faith support women's reproductive choice.
That's great. I'm super happy the Pope is wrong. I don't know what to tell you. You could put anything in here. My mom thinks supports women's reproductive choice. That has no bearing on the calculus. I don't know what my mom's actually. I haven't asked my mom's opinion on this. I have no idea what she thinks. It's kind of weird. I thought I would have asked that by now, but maybe I do. I don't know. I'm leaving my mom out of this, okay? But it doesn't matter what anybody's opinion on anybody's quote unquote reproductive choice or murdering of a baby is. It doesn't matter. The moral calculus stays the same. There I go again. Take another shot.
Brian says, let's keep our moms out of this, Christopher. Oh. All right. Okay. We're getting close to the end here. So this is the layman's. Here's how I'll set this up. This is the layman's most complicated, seemingly rational argument for abortion that I've heard. And you guys might have heard this. It's called like the violinist analogy or allegory or argument. And do you want me to read it or do you want to? How do you want to do this?
I can read it.
Okay. All right.
It's called the violinist argument. You may have heard this before. We're going to go through the whole thing. Imagine you wake up one morning in a hospital bed and your kidneys have been connected to a famous unconscious violinist. It turns out the Society of Music Lovers has kidnapped you and has connected you to this violinist in order to filter the rare blood type you both share. They must do this for 9 months, and only then will the violinist recover and no longer need your assistance. The hospital director apologizes for what the Society of Music Lovers has done to you, but insists that the violinist is a person with a right to life, and therefore you cannot unplug yourself from him without killing him and violating his right to life.
I think this is a great analogy because obviously the unspoken part is the linchpin or the cornerstone that doesn't exist, that the whole thing falls apart. And also I'll do that in a minute, but if you reverse it or inverse it, you'll also see the strength of the opposite side. So you have been abducted, which is an initiation of force, and placed in a hospital bed and had your body hooked up to something absent your consent. So on its face, this is an analogy for rape. And they never, to them, the people making this argument, they're not setting it up as an analogy for rape. They're setting it up for like just a normal, oops, I got pregnant on purpose or on accident. And you wake up and find yourself connected to a famous violinist. But it is, because of the initiation of aggression, an analogy for rape. This person has been placed in a biological state of slavery against their consent. Let's put it. Maybe, is that a good way to put it? Yeah, they've been biologically enslaved against their consent. And so, I mean, clearly, like we talked about with rape earlier, they are free to get rid of that obligation and escape that obligation and make their body property whole again. Using the least violent way possible, at least against we're assuming the violinist didn't do the abducting, like they're innocent, right? It was the violinist society, right? Because that's the analogy. The violinist is the baby and the society's the bad people, and the person getting hooked up is the mother. So on its face, it's a disanalogy because it's actually an analogy to rape, non-consensual. But if you flip it around, the person being kidnapped and put in a state of like biological hookup to a violinist is kind of a better analogy for the baby in the situation. They have been placed in this state of sort of biological dependence on this other person against their consent. And in this case, the violinist would have actually had a hand in it. I'm probably mixing the analogies too much, Kristen. So tell me to shut up if I am. But,
no, keep going.
But for the violinist to hook that person up to them is sort of something that makes that violinist responsible for the person being hooked up to them. And if they cut them loose and they die, well, the violinist is responsible for that. The violinist is culpable for the effects of their actions. They created that situation. This goes all the way back to the very beginning of the stream. If you create a situation, you are culpable for the effects. If you take actions in the world that create situations and repercussions, you are culpable for those repercussions. I probably shouldn't have mixed metaphors there, especially not with its own metaphor. But the missing cornerstone in the analogy is is first of all it's a better analogy to rape. But even if we paper that over and ignore the non-consensual kidnapping part of the equation, well, no, I mean, you can't. Like, if you are there consensually, like if you signed up to be hooked up to the violinist, and then withdrew your consent and the violinist died, like that's on you. You own that situation. You own the effects of your actions. If you agreed to that situation. I did a terrible job at that. I wish I could rewind the stream and do it again.
I think so. There's a lot of different reformulations of the violinist argument that try to bring it more into line with how abortion actually functions. Like, there's a really silly one because people like to be silly with their hypotheticals. And it's like, oh, so here's the other one. You walked up behind a violinist, you have tubes connected to your kidneys, and you stabbed him in the kidneys with these needles, right? It's going to take him 9 months to recover. Can you pull out the needles and but they have to stay in for him to recover. Can you pull out the needles and let him die because it's inconvenient for you to have to stay hooked up to him? In that kind of circumstance, you're morally culpable for the circumstance that the violinist is now in. And so now you are responsible to stay on the drip with him until he's recovered. And then restitution afterwards, most likely.
Yeah, so I guess that's the answer. Like, in their scenario, it's rape, so there is no obligation. But they try and equate this scenario to a normal pregnancy or even to an accidental pregnancy, and that is a disanalogy. Their analogy is a rape scenario in which the mother does have the right to evict, and a normal pregnancy or an accidental pregnancy is not. That is something that you took actions to create the situation in. Okay, I did a better job that time around. Okay, now we're in the last category. These are libertarian specific arguments or accusations. Not all of these are arguments. Some of them are just things that we hear when we say this stuff in libertarian or anarchistic or voluntarist circles. And at the end of the video, I want to take a moment and kind of hit these points. Another notification for you. If you disagree with anything we've said, if you have any arguments for abortion that we haven't heard yet, click the link in the description, disenthrall.me/platforms. On that page, join our Discord server, and you can call into the show on Discord, and we'll have you on, and you can tell us how we're wrong to our faces, and we will appreciate you sticking up for your ideas and potentially showing us where we're wrong. So if you have any counter arguments, please consider joining our Discord and letting us know. My producer, Fallstar, is in main voice, and he will facilitate getting you moved over into voice. Shout out to Fallstar. Feel free to support the show. All donations today go to Fallstar. Okay, libertarian specific. Let's see. So somebody said this to me. Is this the bit where government tyranny is okay when it targets the other gender, Patrick? So go ahead, Christian. Speak for me.
I will speak on your behalf now. The government tyranny is never okay. The government tyranny is never okay. But what we're actually seeing here is not an increase in government tyranny or a redirection, but it's actually kind of the opposite. Now, the Roe v. Wade decision has a lot of technicalities to it, to where it's not legislation and blah, 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 blah. But what it's done is facilitate environments where the unethical murdering of babies is not going to be a thing in a lot of places. And that is a good outcome from a bunch of wizards casting magic spells with their wands. It's not legitimizing the organization that did it. We just happen to agree with the arbitrary determination that they came to through non-arbitrary means. That's all it means.
The next one is more, I have a response to that, but I'll include it with the next one. I think it's not the government's job to tell us what to do. And they'll say the libertarian position is that it's none of the government's business. The government shouldn't have an opinion. It shouldn't make laws either way on abortion. And they say this like, checkmate, fellow libertarian, you have to shut up now because you have, as a libertarian, as an anarchist, you have to agree that the government's role is nothing, is zero. Yes, correct. But you didn't get me because the government also has laws against murder. Do I want the government to have laws against murder? No, I don't want the government to exist. But am I going to be terribly upset and butthurt that the government doesn't want you to murder? Not really. I mean, like, if the local mafia is going to do anything, and it happens to, like, kill another murderer in the process of being a mafia, I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Like, if the local mafia kills a murderer or captures and jails a murderer because they have a rule against murder on their turf, am I supposed to be upset that they got a murderer? I mean, do I think the mafia should exist? No. Do I think the mafia should have laws or rules? No, they shouldn't exist. I don't consent to, their involvement in my life. Am I going to get butthurt that one group of bad people killed another bad person? No. So it's kind of the same thing. Do I want anti-abortion laws? No, the government shouldn't exist. And this is not an inconsistent position. I can be against the existence of the government and also not butthurt when the government gets a bad guy. So that's something that a lot of libertarians need to hear. Like, I don't, if a murderer gets got, I don't give a shit one way or another who got him. I mean, in fact, I would appreciate it if it wasn't the government doing it, because then I wouldn't be sort of taxed to do it. But if it happens, I mean, hey, the government did something semi-right, maybe, kind of, for once.
Do we cry when the wolf kills a fox?
Yeah. Do
we cry? Yeah, I mean, like, they're state of nature beings warring against one another. It's what they do.
Yeah. I'll give it to you, Christian, but the last thing I want to say is, like, the point is, fellow anarchists, fellow libertarians, being anti-murder does not make you pro-government, because you swap out the words. Like, murder is wrong. We all agree murder is wrong. Do we want the government to have a law against murder? No, we don't want the government to exist. But are we going to be terrible? Are we just going to be emotionally distraught if the government captures an actual murderer? No. Like, why would we complain about that? Like, maybe you would. Maybe, you're going to complain about but it's not a moral issue. How about that? Put it that way. Like, not being butthurt that the government does something does not make me not a libertarian. How about that?
Yeah, and you've seen a lot of this with the recent Supreme Court decisions. Like, people, another one, the Supreme Court struck down New York's requirements for, like, getting a gun permit or whatever. Yeah, people are still going to have to get the stupid pieces of paper that say the law allows you to protect yourself now. But way more people will have access to firearms if this sticks and they don't find some loophole to it, which they will. But so, like, am I okay with the government having laws that allow the people to not be able to defend themselves? No, I'm not okay with that. But I'm happy that potentially millions of people would be able to arm themselves on a day-to-day basis if they wanted to. Of course, I'm happy about that. It's not the government's doing. They should have always had the right to do that. It just happens to be that the state of affairs has moved in alignment with how I'd like to see the future. That's it. It's not an endorsement of them or their actions.
The fetus is not a reciprocating entity, Christian.
We've addressed this one quite a bit, I feel like, during the stream. And so I won't harp on it for too long. But we've talked about this as far as what are rights and who gets them. We have this descriptive quality to it that allows us to talk about rights in a way that anything that will come into the reciprocation of rights ought to be afforded them. And that allows fetuses, babies, whichever term you prefer in this situation, to be able to be protected by the normal rights that you would afford anyone else. That's the simplest way I could put it.
Yeah, and I would just say, again, to simplify, neither are you a rights reciprocating entity when you're asleep or unconscious on the operating table or when you get knocked out when you accidentally fell and bumped your head. And we don't stop reciprocating your right to life and property during those times. Like if I come and take all your stuff while you're asleep, it's still called theft because we still reciprocate property rights even when we're not actively currently rights reciprocating creatures. Also, no 1-year-old on the planet is a rights reciprocating entity. So, but we still reciprocate their right to not get murdered. Okay, so what else do we have here? Okay, so I kind of want to read this whole thing. What do you think?
Sure.
This is because this is from a viewer, and we're having a back and forth on an earlier stream, and they kind of heard a lot of the arguments that we've already made, and I think it's worth just let me just read it. A better, I think, devastating counterargument is that the fetus is not a person. It's human, but not person, with whom we could contract or agree to establish mutual respect of any rights. It's no different than animals. Not a moral agent, not sentient. So nobody's rights are violated if it dies because no rights-bearing person was ever there. Your counter to that, talking to me, was that potential sentience is adequate. You brought up the example of the sleeping person. But note the dissimilarity. That is a sleeping person. He previously was a person. He previously agreed with us to not kill each other, even when asleep. So the sleeping person may have rights, but only because he was recently an awake person with whom such rights had been agreed. Again, no natural law here. I'm speaking as a contractarian. Contractarian is somewhat close to anti-subjectivist. But the embryo never used to be a person. We never agreed with it anything. Maybe we would in the future if it woke up. But it's up to us to allow that to happen or not. If the mother doesn't want to allow it, she will not have violated anyone's rights because nobody has yet existed. No person, I mean. If you believe that potentiality of rights means actuality of rights, then why not recognize my right to sleep in your house? After all, I could potentially in the future buy it from you someday. That's absurd, of course. Your response should be that it's up to you to sell it or not to me. And until you have made that determination, I have no right to sleep in your house. And that's true. Potential rights are not actual rights. They are counterfactual. It's up to the mother to decide whether to allow her currently owned lump of meat to acquire self-ownership or not. Once it does, once it becomes a person, then it's too late for her to change her mind. Then the person is self-owned, according to us, libertarians, of course. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I want to hand that to Christian first, but before I do, I just want to say that this is the strongest attempt at justifying abortion that I've heard from any libertarian, even better than Rothbard, for the record. Rothbard is just really easily shown to be inconsistent and wrong, and just insanely so. This was a better attempt at it than even Rothbard, so that's kudos to you in my opinion. Christian, there's several things in here, like beginning with person. What do you have to say on that?
We talked about person way earlier on, but for those of you joining us now, I'll do a brief recap of it. The notion of person being what is due rights is both arbitrary and ambiguous. The term person, good luck defining that in an ethical context is would be one of my replies to it in a way that isn't arbitrary or objectionable. There is no like empirical metric for personhood or what it means to be a person. There's not even agreement metaphysically on the ontology of the word person. How could there ever be an empirical agreement, right? At this point, anyways. So this notion of personhood isn't really what we're concerned with, but let's say, for the sake of this argument, that when he says person, he means rights reciprocating being. That's his definition of person. Okay, cool. We'll work with that. A sleeping person in this context has about as much personhood in the context of being a rights reciprocating being as a baby. There's the only reason we use the term sleeping person is for communicability. If we're going to use person to mean rights reciprocating being, it's probably not super accurate to talk about in the moment a sleeping person being a person. This quality of personhood is like you being able to engage, to have the capacity to engage with these like contracts, for example. And when you're asleep, you don't have that. When you're a baby, you don't have that. Nonetheless, you're still afforded rights. It seems to be that we kind of have like a semantic hang up that feels kind of like a gotcha, not in a disingenuous way, but in like a way to attempt to forward this person's argument to where they're like, you said a sleeping person. And my understanding of person confers this meaning that a baby does not have. And I would argue that under the context of person that we're using here, a sleeping person and a baby are equivalent. But that's the first part of it. I'm sure you have more thoughts, Patrick.
Yeah, I'll take the second sort of paragraph. This is talking about previously having been shown to be a rights reciprocating person. Therefore, because they've shown it previously, that's why we reciprocate rights with them. Because before they were asleep, they reciprocated rights. And so while they're asleep, we will reciprocate rights. But that's not how we do it. When we meet a new person, when we meet a stranger that we've never met before, we have no idea what kind of person they are. If they're a bad guy, a good guy, murderer, peaceful person, whatever. We have no idea of their history in terms of their rights reciprocation. We have no idea of what their capacity for. We have no idea if they have the mental capacity to reciprocate rights or to even understand what rights are. We don't know them. We've never met them. We have no experience with them. We, by default, start out reciprocating rights with new people that we meet. Think of the game theory if we don't. If we didn't respect the rights of people until they had respected our rights first. Think of the game theory. No one would ever reciprocate rights because they would be running the same math in their head, not reciprocating your rights. So you two people meet, neither of them reciprocate rights with the other people because they have no history with them. We're waiting to have history before we reciprocate with them. Then neither of them ever logically will ever begin reciprocating rights with each other because they're both waiting to see the other person start reciprocating rights first. It'll never happen. It sort of invalidates itself as a logical way to go about living your moral philosophy. You give people the benefit of the doubt while cautiously watching them to see. And giving them the benefit of the doubt is just not attacking them and not stealing their property and not hurting them or murdering them. You wait to see what kind of entity they're going to be before you before you decide how you're going to interact with them. What's the saying? It's like, when I first meet people, I treat them how I want to be treated. And then after that, I treat them how they treat me. Like that's a good description of what we're talking about here. To invert that is to basically eliminate moral philosophy because now everyone will just treat each other as state of nature animals until they've altruistically decided or randomly decided to reciprocate rights with you first. So that's what I have to say on the second paragraph. Go ahead.
I have something to add to that, but so I have two ways I could do. I could do super nerdy, thorough philosophy, or I could simplify it and we could move along. But I do have one thing I want to add, whichever way you'd prefer.
This is not Vice. This is Disenthrall. We go super nerdy here.
Okay. So something since you're congratulations. If you've been here the whole time, welcome. So this determination, you could say that we ought to afford rights to people that we meet because we have a sort of a precedent set, a substantiation that when we meet someone, we should expect them to reciprocate our rights until proven otherwise, is one that is created inductively, right? Now, a lot of people will point at this, and inductive is, I'm going to use a quick example, and it's basically like, you see a black raven, you make the determination that all ravens are black. You see 10,000 black ravens, you make the determination that all ravens are black, and you increase that number ad infinitum. But until you've seen every single raven, you cannot say for certain that all ravens are black. In this case, you meet one person, they reciprocate your rights. People reciprocate your rights. And then you do that for 10, 100, 1,000, whatever. The only way that this inductive logic would pose an issue is if our system didn't have a way for addressing when someone doesn't reciprocate rights. Now, if you say all ravens are black and you find a white raven, your model of what a raven is falls apart. But we have two distinct categories of people, you could say colloquially, that are rights reciprocating, normal, average, ethical human beings, and then you have your state of nature beings. So this is super important because I have seen a couple of people who are like, oh, that's an inductive argument. It's not capable of substantiating anything. That is only true if our system didn't allocate for people who are outliers. You treat people as if they are rights reciprocating until proven otherwise, and the system has the faculties necessary to guide you forward when they prove they are not otherwise. So I know I went into inductive logic and all that nonsense, but I feel like for anybody out there who's interested in this kind of thing and cares about that kind of nitty-gritty stuff, it could be an enlightening thing if they didn't cue onto that before.
And the last thing I want to say on it is consider also that you're being sort of watched by other people. So it's not just like a one-to-one reciprocation relationship. If I see Christian attack some other innocent person, I may decide to not reciprocate rights with him because he's a violent psychopath. There is no sort of like one-to-one requirement here. It's not like I have a relationship with Christian that we reciprocate rights, and you have an entirely separate, independent relationship that my relationship with him and his actions towards me doesn't affect. Other people might see Christian doing violent things and decide that, oh, well, I'm not going to associate with him, or, oh, I'm going to come to the aid of the innocent people he's hurting and attack Christian, and which is just another way of saying they're not reciprocating rights with him if they're going to attack him defensively on the behalf of somebody else. And so if somebody, the point I'm making here is that even if it's not a one-to-one thing that you're concerned about with the unborn baby, other people can see you taking violent actions against that person and say, oh, well, if he's not going to reciprocate rights with children just because they're in the womb, then fuck that guy. I don't need to reciprocate rights with him either. So there's more to be concerned with than just the one-to-one. That was my point that I wanted to make there. In addition. So like me, I will certainly think less of people and potentially even reciprocate rights less with people that think it's okay to kill unborn children. And that's how rights work. They're mutual reciprocal agreements. And if you think it's okay to hurt the most innocent among us, I'm going to be far less obliged to reciprocate jack or shit with you. Did we handle that one fully? Let's see.
Yeah, for the ending, I think once, with all the illustration that we've done at this point, the idea of the potentiality of owning a house in the future doesn't really fit into what we're talking about. It's talking about a separate kind of potentiality of rights. We're not talking about like, oh, you might become a millionaire someday, so you're like entitled to $1 million. There's nothing of that sort in here. All that we are saying is that this person is due consensual interaction. This baby is due consensual interaction and nothing more, nothing less. We're not saying that they're due a loving home because they have a potential for a loving home. None of that nonsense. It's all just that they are due the same consensual respect as everybody else. And no further or less.
Okay. So we're really close here. There's a couple more frequent arguments that I get from libertarians and voluntarists and anarcho-capitalists. One very frequent one is consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. Do you want to take this one or is it my turn? I forgot. Who started?
You can go. Okay. It's fine.
So this is just another culpable for the situations that you create. You're culpable for your actions. If you create a situation, you are culpable for that situation. If you point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger, you can't withdraw your consent to be culpable for what happens when where the bullet goes. So if I point a gun at Christian and I pull the trigger and the bullet leaves the barrel, and I can't be like, oh, I consented to firing the gun, but I didn't consent to that bullet hitting anyone. And therefore I'm not culpable for the effects of that bullet because I just consented to the gun firing part, not to the bullet hitting Christian part. That's the easiest way to illustrate the absurdity of that, is the people like to withdraw their consent or think they can just eject themselves from culpability for the effects of their actions. What's up, Jim? Good to see you in chat.
And I think that goes straight into the next one. You're merely consenting to giving the fetus a chance at life by having sex and conceiving. You're not necessarily obligated to carry it to term. You're responsible for the effects of your actions. You're putting the baby in a perilous situation where it is incapable of surviving without your continued assistance. And so you ought to carry the baby for the rest of its term. I feel like it follows from the same set of ideas you were just talking about.
It does, but also just to kind of talk around it a little bit more, there's another analogy that kind of fits some of these situations, like called the human making machine. And think of it like a big piece of machinery sitting inside of a warehouse that you own. You own the warehouse, you own the machine. There's a big red button on the machine, and every time that button gets pushed, a human is created. And you, like I said, you own the property, you own the machine. If you push that button, you created a human. You are responsible for that situation because you operated the machinery in a way, even by accident. If you're walking by and fell and landed on the machine, you have that machine. It's your machine. You know how it works. You walked by the button, you accidentally hit it, or you hit it on purpose, and you created something that you're culpable for. If you, let people come to your warehouse and play, games, and they bump into the button and create a human. Well, that was your choice too. If it was a consensual situation, again, the exception is rape, right? If somebody breaks in and hits the button, you're not culpable for that one. You didn't consensually create that situation. In fact, you disconsented to that situation. You have a machine. It is there whether you like it or not. It operates in a deterministic way. When that button is pushed, there's a chance a human will pop out. The sperm and the egg, these are biological machines. And they are your machines, they're your property, you own them. And if you operate them by bringing them near the other person's machinery, we know how that works. It works. It's machinery. The button gets pushed, babies pop out, you own the effects of your actions. You are culpable for the effects of your actions.
I feel like I'm having the talk with all of this machinery analogy.
It's so simple. And the only way that you get to abortion is not murder is by making it super convoluted, it seems like. Jim says Patrick says women are just baby machines. It is a machine. Like, this is biological machines. And if you put one machine that's like the slot A next to the other machine that's tab B, those two machines interoperate in a specific deterministic way that will often result in a baby popping out. It's not like you can just willy-nilly push the red button and be like, oh, well, all those babies popping out, I didn't consent to that. Well, you just keep pushing the button, you know what it does. It's just so detached from being culpable for the effects of your actions. Okay, sorry, that was a long digression. Okay, now it's time for Rothbard. We're going to do Rothbard, and then we're going to do one last argument, and then we're done. So congratulations. Thanks for everybody sticking around. I hope this has helped at least refine your understanding, whether or not we convinced you or reinforced your already existing opinions on it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now we're going to do Rothbard. Rothbard is something else. And we just did a long stream where we read the meat of the Ethics of Liberty by Rothbard. If you want the full exposition on this, go watch that stream. It was like the last stream we did. Maybe stream before last. And in fact, I think I'm going to clip that stream to just do the abortion response to Rothbard and release that as a separate video soon as well. So this is going to be a TLDR on it. But Rothbard's got some super bad takes on children. Super bad. And it's crazy to me that most libertarians aren't aware of just how super bad some of these takes are. A lot of people don't know Rothbard thinks it's chill to starve your children. Do you want to read this one?
Of those, I find Rothbard to be one of those things. It's kind of like Ayn Rand. Like, everybody loves to talk about how they like Ayn Rand, but I don't know very many people who've actually read Atlas Shrugged. I'm just going to go out there and say that. I'm sure in the comments, everybody's going to talk about how they love Atlas Shrugged and it's their favorite book, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. But, I totally believe you. Okay. Rothbard. We have two excerpts and then we have a big paragraph. And so this is all painting a picture in as genuine as a way as possible without us reading through the entire chapter again. On the other hand, it is clear that a newborn babe is in no natural sense an existing self-owner, but rather a potential self-owner. First, let us begin with the prenatal child. What is the parent's, or rather mother's, property right in the fetus? The proper groundwork for analysis of abortions is in every man's absolute right of self-ownership. This implies immediately that every woman has the absolute right to her own body and that she has absolute dominion over her body and everything within it. This includes the fetus. Most fetuses are in the mother's womb because the mother consents to the situation, but the fetus is there by the mother's freely granted consent. But should the mother decide that she does not want the fetus there any longer, then the fetus becomes a parasitic invader of her person. And the mother has the perfect right to expel this invader from her dominion. Abortion should be looked upon not as murder of a living person, but as the expulsion of an unwanted invader from the mother's body. Any laws restricting or prohibiting abortion are therefore invasions of the rights of the mother.
So it surprises me greatly that Rothbard just doesn't apply the culpability for one's actions, because he literally establishes property rights through culpability for the effects of your actions by talking about the old school Lockean, you mix your labor with something, that's how you make something your property. That's how you homestead something. You are culpable. He even says things like you own the effects of your actions. And that's how you come to own things. Oh, but not with making humans. No. You don't own the effects of those actions. You mixed your labor with that punani, but you don't have any culpability for what happens. It's mere property. Whatever pops out is merely your property to be disposed of as you will. And then he even talks about this continuum problem of trying to figure out where the non-arbitrary, non-subjective line is when the kid goes from being your owned property, like chattel property, to being a self-owner. It's hard to say. It's like it's the time when it's born. Why? Oh, it's obvious. It's just really, really bad. It's this argument is the equivalent of like me abducting someone, putting them in my basement, locking them in my basement, and then declaring that what did he say? I don't consent to them being in there anymore. They're now a parasitic invader, which I can now starve to death or, throw out in the cold and let them, die in the cold if I want, because they're just a parasitic invader. No. Like, I created that situation. I put them in there. That's on me. I don't get to fire the gun analogy is so perfect for this stuff. I pointed the gun and I fired it. And I don't get to withdraw my consent to what happens to the bullet when it leaves the gun. That is absurd and undermines everything this guy says about self-ownership and property.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, really. If you haven't read at least this chapter, maybe you're not into the natural law stuff or whatever, the PDF's out there. Go read the chapter on children. It is pretty, not all of it's bad. He talks about some stuff with children in the government that I think is actually pretty good. But as far as parenting and abortion are concerned, man, he has got some spicy takes. So...
Go go read it. Like, a lot of Rothbard's stuff is fantastic. Rothbard's amazing. I love Rothbard. He's just terrible on kids and parenting. He's just the worst takes I've pretty much ever heard. Just the ethics of liberty. Like, you'll love a lot of what's in there. If you want to watch our analysis of the moral philosophy of it, we just did a 4-hour stream on that, which you guys might enjoy, where we go through the whole chapter. Well, first of all, we go through the whole actual moral philosophy portion. And then we do like a bonus on abortion and children and parenting, and we actually go through the whole chapter. And we get into the part where he's like, they're your property. So if you decide to stop feeding them, cool. So if you want to hear more on that, we did a whole stream on it. We won't belabor that point here. All right. Do you want me to set you up for this last one?
Sure.
Okay, this is one that you were wanting to address last. We're at the last part of the stream, guys. So I want to do one more shout out. If you think we're wrong, if you have a counter argument, if you have an argument for abortion they haven't heard, click on the platform's link in the description. Join our Discord server. You're welcome to call into the show. Okay, here we go. I'm personally against abortion, but I'm still pro-choice. It's a legal alternative, and we don't have the right to keep it from anyone. Everyone's free to believe what they want, but we shouldn't try to impose it on others. Very common libertarian position.
Yeah, maybe not so much like the legal part, but the ending for sure. Everyone's free to believe what they want, but we shouldn't try to impose it on others. And I see this as kind of an accidental form of like libertarian maximalism, but not in like a good or coherent way. So they're like, the thought process here is that, okay, so we're free to make our own choices and actions, and there's going to be some disagreement, but it doesn't really matter. Like, if people disagree what I do with my property, who cares? It's my property. They should just mind their own business. That's where a lot of this comes from, is the mind your own business idea. And so why should we go around trying to impose this on other people? Let's just stick to our own slice of the pie. Change this to anything else. I'm personally against murder. I'm personally against genocide. I'm personally against stealing your car and killing your family. Like, I just put anything else you want in there and it all completely falls apart. It's a legal alternative, or skip that. Everyone's free to believe what they want. Would you say that if someone came up and mugged you and stole all of your things? Everyone's free to believe what they want. I'm going to make a serious charge here, but I'm not going to do it lightly. I don't think they actually believe this. And this is anecdotal. We've gone through all of the philosophy stuff with it, but what it sounds like to me is that they have an emotional baggage one way or another, and it's a very difficult issue for a lot of people to overcome, and they don't want to address it. That's fine. You don't have to have an opinion on the matter. You can step out of it as much as you want. But claiming that other people are trying to impose what is good ethics onto other people isn't the case. That's not how any of this works. No one is imposing that someone ought not to murder somebody. That's part of the deal. If you want to be a rights reciprocating human who has their rights reciprocated, you don't murder people. So I understand where it comes from, and I understand most people have very good intentions when they say this, but it is misguided, fundamentally misguided.
Yeah, especially from libertarians. It's fundamentally contradictory and self-defeating of all the other libertarian, anarchistic, voluntarist principles. Following a moral philosophy is to restrict one's own behaviors. It is to look at interactions between humans and apply moral judgments based on an equation. Whatever your moral philosophy is, you are judging human interaction. To be a libertarian is to recognize that the initiation of force is wrong, is to look at interactions between, let's say, a government agent or a cop and a peaceful person minding their own business when the government taxes them or cages them for victimless crimes. You are applying a moral judgment. You are imposing your moral beliefs on others, on everyone around you that's a statist, that's wrong. You're saying that's wrong. Stop it. That's evil. Stop it. That is to impose your beliefs on others, your moral beliefs. To try and carve this one out as being an exception is just, again, it's just arbitrary and subjective, and it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out for libertarians to impose these sweeping moral judgments on most of the population that are statists, certainly hundreds of thousands of people in government, and then just carve out this one niche where, oh, nope, like this one type of murder, we can't impose our beliefs on others. That's not it at all. That's not it at all. I mean, yeah. Either that or you have to like become a statist, or you at least have to be cool with statists. You're not a libertarian by definition. Like if you're not imposing your moral judgments on statists, then by definition you're not a libertarian, I would say. Go ahead.
It's just disingenuous, honestly. Like, if you uphold the principles that would quote unquote motivate you to this kind of logic, with me being charitable about it, then you don't actually believe this. It's disingenuous. Maybe you do think you actually believe this, as funny as that is to sound. I'm not going to go into the epistemology here, but there's a conflict here that has to be resolved. Okay. I'm not saying that you have to go out and beat the drum. I'm not saying that you have to be the one who does what you deem to be ethical based on the circumstances. But to say that there isn't any moral imperative here, ethical prescription going on, or ethical situation that you should have an answer to, is not being fair to any of the rest of everything that you do and are a part of.
Yeah, every time you watch any video where a cop is doing something to somebody, you're like, that's evil. Like, that, you're doing that here. And if you're saying that we can't do that, then you can't do that ever. Which kind of means you have to be a pacifist. Because the only way to not impose your moral framework on other people is to let them do whatever they want, even to you. So, unless you're a hard pacifist, this ain't you. And if you're a hard pacifist, then we have other issues. Phobia is clipping my sex is labor part to torture me with later. Thanks, Phobia. Your clipping is so appreciated. All right. That's it. That's the end of the list. 2 hours, 51
plus
minutes.
Some extras. Yeah, not bad.
Okay. Well, I don't... Go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry, you said 2 hours, 51 minutes. I thought I was about to say, I think it's 3 hours. But yeah, I gotcha.
Yep.
My brain...
Jim super chats the proper way. Thank you, sir. He says, yeah, but you violate the nap of the woman as she sucks the baby out to die with the vacuum. Checkmate. Yeah.
F.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the point that brings up is like, it's a little bit of the, okay, so what are you saying you can do to people that get abortions, and what can you do to the abortion doctors? And I guess our position, speaking for you, Christian, let me know if you disagree. I'm pretty sure you agree, is that the same stuff you can do to murderers. Like it's an equivalent action between humans. And why do we say that? Well, it's justified by like, well, what who's going to complain? Like, so I murder a murderer. What's the murderer going to complain about? That I'm trying to murder him? I think there's a concept called estoppel. Estopped. He is estopped from making that defense because he is doing the thing he's complaining about. If you are murdering somebody, you can't complain if somebody tries to murder you. And that's kind of like all wrapped up back into this reciprocation, which is what rights are. If you stop reciprocating, you can't complain. Go ahead. Sorry.
They're state of nature beings to the maximal order. Literal might makes right beings with, in this particular scenario, let's say no aim of restitution or anything. You have no reason to believe that they will ever reciprocate rights again, and particularly not your right to continue living. So you would be adequately justified in dealing with that as you would any other person that put you in that situation.
There's two things I want to not forget to mention. Well, one is we had a good comment just now. Eye for an eye is a slippery slope. Nowhere in this video have we prescribed what you should do to people that get abortions. That is a separate discussion on how the justice system could or should work absent a coercive mafia running everything in the area. I don't agree that the best course of action would be to always murder the murderers. I'm just saying that, like, maximally taken to the extreme, that is what is justified, or at least they couldn't complain about it. The other thing I want to say is I want to like take a moment to steel man one of the things that we're going to get from somebody, because I hear it on Twitter all the time, is okay, so you're going to put a teenage girl in jail for getting an abortion. That's the accusation. And of course they're trying to play on the feels of like a young girl, an underage girl getting an abortion. And I'm like, would you make the same argument to an underage gang member that shot and murdered an innocent person? Are you going to feel as bad about caging that murdering child as you would about this other topic that we're talking about? When you substitute this stuff out, it becomes a lot clearer. Now, commonly in justice systems, like an underage kid that murders somebody is usually given a much lighter sentence than a grown adult doing it. So all that stuff makes sense, and all this stuff can play into the discussion of proper restitution and justice around that. And we haven't really gotten into any of that in this video on purpose, almost, because we've covered enough just setting the moral framework for it. So hopefully, I mean, maybe we'll do justice in a free society in a separate video. That's a long topic.
DROs and arbitration gets into rabbit holes of rabbit holes of rabbit holes. So it's a long talk.
It's fun. I mean, it's fun. It's just we've gone long enough for tonight, and I want to go play some video games with my Friday night. So I think that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go hang out on Discord. Okay, so in conclusion, this has been the most comprehensive list of pro-abortion arguments that we could find. We addressed each and every one based on a moral framework that we laid out at the beginning. To the best of our ability, we've made this comprehensive. If we miss something, look for other arguments that are adjacent to it, because we probably covered it, because we covered so many of them. But if you think you really have something novel, contact us on Discord or something like that. Give us your argument. And give it to us in long form. Don't just like drop some snarky bullshit in the comments. That will be ignored. Give it to us in an earnest way. And if it's novel, we will create an add-on video. So if you're watching this, look in the description right now. If you're watching this in the future, there will be a link in the description to say add-on video number 1, add-on video number 2. If people have given us truly new novel arguments, we will create follow-up videos addressing them and attach them, because I want this to be a one-stop resource for everybody that wants to address this issue from a voluntarist, anarcho-capitalist, anarchist, libertarian perspective. I want this video to be that comprehensive answer. So feel free to link people to this video, and hopefully someone, myself, will do it. We'll go through and time code all the different arguments, and maybe you can even link people directly to it. I'm a little worried about doing that, though, because the judgments and the arguments that we make are based on the beginning. So you kind of have to watch the beginning to see why the answers make sense. Without the context, it might be confusing. But thanks for watching, everybody. I don't see anybody calling in, so I will just take that to mean that we convinced all of you, or that you already agreed, and that there's no dissenting opinions. Alfredo says 41 plus ways to say don't kill babies are rambling by Patrick and Christian. Was it rambling? I hope not, but maybe it was. Listen,
I will say we thoroughly beat this dead horse. Like it is pulpy. Like it's gone. If there's, you should know, if you do come up with a novel solution, you should be able to tell based off of what we said exactly what our reply would be. But you know, because we've come at this from so many different angles and said the same thing so many times. If nothing else, we're consistent. So
yep, and let no one say that no one made a rational argument against abortion ever again, because we've definitely done that here. So hopefully. Hopefully, look, I'm happy to have finally done this. Christian, thank you very much for partnering with me yet again on a piece of work that I've literally, I wasn't exaggerating. I've had this at the top of my list for this channel since I started the channel, and it's good to finally have it done. So, we have somebody's going to call in. Yeah, I'll wait for you if you hurry. You're making everyone wait, so hurry. I mean, I warned everybody like 7 times. and you wait until I'm literally about to turn the stream off to be like, I'll call it. Yeah, come on. Zambrera says, good stream, comprehensive. Some people might be hearing these ideas for the first time. You did a good job explaining them. I hope so. That was my intention. And like, I waited to make this video 4 years because it's complicated, and I wanted to make sure that I had really thought through every little argument and tangent. And just so you know, like, we didn't have comprehensive notes on answers to every one of these questions. I could show you our notes document for the show, and it's literally the questions. It's the list of the pro-abortion arguments. All of the answers that we've given you are from rote memory, because I've done this so many times. I've thought through this so much, and I've talked to people about it so much. It's not like we were reading a script here. I don't say that to brag. I just say that to illustrate. What's up, Fallstar?
Hey, we've got a caller for you there, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Bring him on.
All right, I'll send him over.
Also, last call for donations, because Fallstar is an absolute fucking unit. Donate. It goes to him.
All donations today go to Fallstar. And he is in the prison camp of New Zealand. So he could definitely use the help. please toss some super chats. And make sure you use the good super chat link, not the YouTube super chat or the Odysee, whatever. Streamlabs. Yeah, Streamlabs. Use the Streamlab link in the description. All right. Oh, he's muted. Hold on. There you go. You're unmuted. What's up, sir?
The most uncomfortable part is the wait while I'm watching you on screen. I can't see what you guys are actually saying until I actually get into the room.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, well, you should be able to hear us in real time now, right? Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yeah, but when you're told, turn off your screen, then you don't know what's being said that whole time.
I promise we were mostly nice.
I just had a question more than anything.
All right, shoot. Not really, but figuratively.
We kind of covered it in the chat a little bit, and tension started getting a little heated, so I kind of backed off.
Tensions with me or with other people?
What's that?
Tensions with us or with other people in chat? I wasn't watching a lot of it.
No, with other chatters, yeah. Just very, very strong in their feelings and passionate. I didn't want to push buttons too much. So
yeah, like passion around this topic is real. I'm very passionate about it. When I'm not engaged in rational debate and philosophy on the topic, I'm very passionate. Like somebody in one of the Telegram groups I'm a member of posted a video giving advice on how to kill babies without going to an abortion doctor. And I just said, wow, that's disgusting. Like I didn't engage in calm moral philosophy. I just casted, disgusting dispersions at them because that's what they deserve. So yeah, I understand the feeling, but when we're doing philosophy, we got to stay detached at least enough to be rational. Sorry. What's your question?
Well, and you said it before I don't remember which one, but you said, there comes a time when you're in a debate or when you're trying to explore a topic and you just have to rise yourself up, take yourself out of the position. I think you were maybe talking to James Freeman maybe at the time. We were, discussing something else. But anyway, that's how I feel too. I feel very strongly about this, but at the same time, I can disconnect from that temporarily until we, kind of sort out some of the facts and get a better understanding, as to where everyone feels. And that just wasn't going to happen in chat. It's hard enough just to type, without emotion, without body language and such. So,
100%. And just to back that up, no one has ever convinced anyone by raging in chat at them. Or even in person, like you go to these protests, no one has ever flipped somebody from pro to anti or anti to pro by yelling at them and calling them names. And I'm kind of talking to myself too, but I wasn't really trying to change the person's mind that was telling people how to kill babies. I was just labeling it as disgusting for maybe the audience watching on. But like that, if the only way you change people's mind, and I saw some people in chat that were being nasty, like they were completely ineffectual. And I agree with them. They were anti-abortion. I think maybe I misunderstood their position, but I'm pretty sure they were anti-abortion. I agree with them, but they convinced no one behaving like that. At least no one that was going to stick. Like anybody that would be convinced by emotions and rage is not going to be like convinced for very long. I always doubt that. So anyway, sorry to keep interrupting. What do you want to talk about?
Oh no, that's all right. I like the back and forth. I've come to expect it from you. So our big thing that we talked about was the conversation started. So you have you have the seed, as they said, the egg, and then it's fertilized, and then all these things have to happen all the way up until a certain amount of time. I think we covered this in another talk as well, where it's like we're so different from all the other animals on this planet, where we need literally a caretaker for X amount of years, not weeks, months, years, before we can, sustain ourselves, even, if we were out in the wild. I'm starting to throw things around in the office here. So, the question was presented, okay, so you have egg and sperm. Okay, now it's fertilized. Is that a person? Well, I don't know, because now it still has to suck, life from that host, and how many months? Well, at least, 8, 7 or 8, we can have a preemie. Okay, well, is it a person then? So I understand the argument where it's like, when do you find that this being is viable and requiring a certain amount of care that you are now, duty bound to take care of, and then once it's born, now you're still responsible, unless you pass it off to the state or another entity, someone that decides to take on that role. It's a good question, and it's something that needs to be explored, because I know we get into the thick of things on some of this stuff, but when we are absolutely clear, it makes it a lot easier to have those discussions, debates, arguments, with more confidence and less rhetoric, I'd say.
Christian, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. So, just to make sure I'm gathering what you're saying. So this is kind of coming back to like the personhood talk of like, when exactly should someone be afforded rights? Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, and even before that, when do we assume that this is a viable, person, in development, Like the argument that was presented was, women drop eggs every month. Okay, so those aren't viable people. Well, let's add sperm. Okay, is it viable now? Maybe it can't survive on its own. Well, as long as mom takes care of it and it sucks life force from that host for a few months, then is it viable? Well, okay, yeah, possibly, but there's still so many more things that need to happen to that lump before it is viable. So where do we draw that line?
Right. So we've drawn the line at conception. And this is what we've determined to be like the least arbitrary point, that arguably the only non-arbitrary point by which to say this is a living person. And so that's one way to approach this. And I think is one that's scientifically grounded, but perhaps maybe you can test the facts of the matter on that. There's another way to look at this, which is how else would you go about assigning it in a non-arbitrary fashion? So we're kind of working in reverse order here. And it's, why is the question so difficult, right? Whenever we aren't trying to use these underpinning factors of, and again, some people will contest the legitimacy of whether or not the science actually supports like life at conception. We'll forgo that for now. There's a lot of people who will look at this from the angle of, where else do you start that isn't some wishy-washy middle ground in between? We can confidently say we're not talking about the same entity when we're looking at the egg and the sperm separated from each other. These are mechanically, genetically, in every way possible, completely distinct from what will end up becoming the baby. And yes, aesthetically and by a lot of factors, the fertilized egg is different from what the baby will become. But the continuous line that we're looking at here has a definitive start and a definitive end point, and you have to make a determination based off of one of those. And if you're going to go off of the end, you have to have a reason for why, and we'll forego the after birth, is this a person conversation for just a moment and assume we're looking at this one window. If we're just looking at the end, we have to justify why it's the end and not the beginning. And that's where a lot more difficulty comes in if you're trying to work from this from an, I don't want to say ascientific, but let's say conception is contested on the scientific grounds for now. So does that make any sense? I feel like I might have rambled a bit there.
Yeah,
but.
no. And I agree, because that's kind of my stance too, is that, when there is, whether even if we're talking about two, idiots, I guess, as the term would be, coined in our society, people that are unaware of, many things. The intention, I agree, is there when two people come together to change the actual makeup of that egg. The intention does, to me, count, whether they're aware of it or not. I do understand also that, is birth, where the mother is relieved of her responsibility? Is there a statute of limitations on that? Now that someone else can take over the care of that being, that's another hot topic for sure. But yeah, I'm still with you.
So there's a question of, when does the responsibility start and when does the responsibility end? And both of these, like Christian said, the only non-arbitrary answers is conception and death. And we can imagine, for the starting point, when we talk about viability, that's terrible because like a 1-year-old is equally as unviable to survive on its own as a 9-month-old unborn baby, or, you know, like an in utero 9-month-old. Neither can survive on their own. They both need sustenance and direct assistance and protection and care. So the viability thing to me is absurd. I haven't heard a non-arbitrary viability standard. The personhood thing is equally subjective and absurd to nail down. What is different about a 3-month-old in utero baby that makes them not a person? The 3-month and 1 day old one is. If that, you know, like where does the personhood begin? What arbitrary attribute of the human species are you going to pick and say, oh, there, when that one pops into existence, now they're a person? There's no answer I've ever heard or been able to think of where that doesn't just become like arbitrary opinion. So that's when it starts. So when does the rights reciprocation need to start? Has to be conception. That's the only non-arbitrary answer. Then is the end. Like people, like you're talking about this other continuum, like how long are you responsible for them for? And we can like run thought experiments to figure this out. Let's just say, ad arguendo, that there's just the human species is necessarily always dependent on someone. So they never stop becoming an unviable dependent child. We know that going in. So don't create any humans if you don't want a lifelong dependent thing that you're responsible for. It doesn't change the equation. It's just the answer, the cutoff changes. If they will never become self-owning entities, number one, it's logically impossible because then how did you become one? But let's just assume that was the case. Or let's assume you had like a damaged child, which is absolutely possible. You have an impaired child that will always be dependent in some way. That is part of the risk, part of the chance of you taking actions in the world. Actions in the world have unexpected consequences. Just because the consequences are unexpected doesn't mean that we're not culpable for them. Like when we play baseball, going back to the diamond, when we play a baseball game, we don't expect to hit the ball out of the park and break somebody's window. But if that happens as an unexpected outcome of playing baseball, we still are culpable for the effects of our actions. And if the effects of our actions are that maybe an impaired child comes into the world, we still own that situation, even though it might leave us needing to support someone for longer than the typical, 18 years or whatever we want to say.
And this one actually hits hard. Oh, go ahead.
No, I have to, go ahead. You're good.
Oh, okay. And this one actually, it actually hits hard in my, personal life because I have a family member that had to make that choice. And it was, and again, this is all kind of speculation because the doctor made all these assumptions and, we couldn't, guarantee that he was right about this. But what he said was this baby will be born somewhat into a coma and it will be on machines, for its entire life. Now, the question of quality of life came up, and at the time, my family member, the two of them chose to terminate that life, and it's tough. I mean, we celebrate that life. We don't even call it a life, but we celebrate that person that would have been every year. And we have talks every once in a while about these things, like, what if the doctor was wrong and, she would have been fine, or she would have been able to be rehabilitated or whatever. It's tough. And so I like to explore this because there is no one answer. There really isn't.
I have a personal anecdote that I'll share, and this is weird. I don't talk about it often because it always just feels awkward to talk about, because I don't do this stuff for any level of recognition, so I don't talk about it pretty much ever. But I want to tell this anecdote because it matches what you're talking about, and it's topical. There is a group of photographers. It's a nonprofit organization. They do what they call remembrance photography, and I did this for a couple years before my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. What they do is we would be on call during whatever hours we chose to be on call for. And what would happen, I have a lot of photographer experience. I've done a lot of photography, weddings, events, all kinds of stuff. I love photography. So I signed up and I joined this nonprofit. We're on call when a baby is about to be born or has just been born, and they realize that the baby's not going to make it, they call this nonprofit, and the nonprofit will call whatever photographer is assigned to that area and on call for that time, and the photographer will go to the hospital and will do a micro sort of in the moment, as quick as possible, portrait session with the baby, hopefully before it passes, so that the parents can have something to remember the child by. And when I I don't think I ever got used to it, but I guess I'm telling this anecdote because there two reasons. Number one, I'm not ignorant and detached of these circumstances that are the hardest ones that revolve around these topics. I've seen it firsthand. I've held these babies. I've been with them when they passed. I've taken pictures of them during the process. But
Is this a nationwide thing? Because my family member had that done. They're in Chicago. Is that?
There's not many photographers that do it, but the major cities usually have enough photographers that'll do it. Usually the turnover is really fast. Like the photographers will get in there and they obviously, for obvious reasons, can't handle it. So they might do it once or twice and they disappear. So major cities usually have enough population to have enough people to do it.
That's amazing that you brought that up because they did have that done.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about then.
Yeah.
So there was one time where this baby was taken off life. So I won't tell a long and grueling story because I don't want to make the argument from emotion. But the point is, they declared that it was not going to survive. They took it off life support, and it fucking survived. And I have pictures of this baby that was predicted and doomed to death. And all the doctors had said, there's no chance, you guys need to make your peace. They called me in to do the remembrance photo shoot, and it survived and it made it. And a couple days later, it was still making it. And last I checked, it survived. It made it. Now, it had some issues. It was damaged, but it survived. And that just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where you never really know. You can't know. Life is crazy. Doctors are not omniscient yet. Medical science is not perfect. Maybe it never ever will be. But like if they had pulled it off life support, or tried less hard because they had just declared it to be a hopeless cause, who knows what would happen. And I'm not trying to turn the screws on your situation. That's not what I was doing. I just wanted to illustrate my personal experience so that I'm not talking from like some intellectual ivory tower where I'm not, I've never seen terrible situations like this. I just wanted to like share that you never know. Like even the best, most experienced doctors, they never know. This stuff happens.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately they use that on the other side as well, which I mean, I guess in this life, paradox is welcome, but and there is no one argument for or against anything, I guess. But yeah, I've heard that same argument on the other side. You never know. This is I only live once, and these choices are mine, and I get it. And I hear irresponsibility, seems to be the biggest thing that they like to fall back on as well. I can't be responsible for being young and dumb and not knowing any better. Well, maybe we need to change that at home, with the parents and start focusing a lot more energy into that. Educating.
Yeah, and ignorance isn't an out for anything else. I can't pull the trigger and kill somebody and be like, oh, I had no idea that a gun did that, and mean it genuinely. It doesn't erase any of the culpability. Not to say that you were suggesting that, but just to really hit that point home.
No, but I think that is something that seems to be creeping into this society that we have more and more these days.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
I could go on, but no, I think on this subject, I'm kind of tapped out.
All right. Well, we'll be on Discord after the show. You're welcome to hang out and chat. I appreciate the taking the time to call in.
All right. I appreciate your attention.
All right. Have a good one. We have one question here in the comments that we can hit just briefly. We covered backprop asked, sorry, I just got here, so this may have been asked, are you against abortion from rape? Abortion, yes. Eviction, no. There's a distinction there. I don't want to rehash the whole thing because I think we've done it like twice. Go ahead, Christian. What?
It's the other way around, right?
Oh, did I say that backwards?
Yeah, abortion, no. Eviction, yes. There we go.
Oh, if I said that backwards, okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was clear for everybody.
We covered all the stuff in like the first 30 minutes of the stream, so I don't want to rehash the whole thing. But just for the people joining at the end, last thing I'll say: eviction is an eviction. It's like you're removing the trespasser from the property using the most minimal amount of force possible. And so the same thing would apply to a baby, where you want to give it, you want to harm it the least as possible, damage it the least, as little as you can, give it the best chance of surviving as possible, while also still resolving the trespassing issue caused by the rapist, with the rapist culpable for any damage that happens. So if it ends up not being able to survive outside the womb, that's a murder that the rapist should be culpable for. So hopefully that's a decent summary. If you want the in-depth one, you have to watch the stream, man. Sorry. We've been through it. We've been through it in depth. We've hammered it until it, what'd you say? It's goo. What did you say?
Yeah, we beat the horse into a pulp. That's what we've done here.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We're going to hang out on Discord, play some video games. We will see you next time. Any last words, Christian?
Take it easy, everybody.
Awesome.